Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 220, Krylov versus Spann. If you're still counting on the old counting system, it is UFC Vegas 70, but as far as I'm concerned, that naming convention is officially retired now that we have passed the magic number of 69. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how you doing today?
I'm good, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well. As I told you offline just before we hit record here, I just watched the very first episode of The Wire for the very first time after you and several of my other friends have told me I'm crazy for not having watched it. So for our regular listeners, you'll hear me about 15 years late chiming in with like cool shit that I just saw for the first time in 2023. That's right. And Keith will have to be like, yes, settle down.
No, I don't get bored talking about it. It's my favorite TV show ever.
Well, I hope you don't get bored talking about people from Dana White's Contender Series, because this 13-fight card features Dana White's Contender Series alums in 11 of the 13 fights. It is as much a case of Dana White's Saturday Night Contender Series as you can possibly imagine. We're on a streak of cards here that it brought a comment out of one of our regular listeners / viewers that I actually wanted to address, like out loud here and kind of give him a shout out and a response. I mean, we're on a 4-week stretch here of this card, then UFC Vegas 69, which obviously, the Andrade versus Blanchfield card in terms of name value, competitive value is an absolute mess. UFC 284 before that, which again, really low standard for a UFC pay-per-view. And then before that was the Lewis versus Spivak card that had all of the road to UFC finals on it. Like it's a dry stretch of cards. And Ben Cooley, longtime listener, I believe he drops in on the post-fight recaps as well. Mm-hmm. He said in the comments on our last preview, I love how you guys break down every fight, no matter what, even if some days it feels more like work than others. Yeah. I thought that was an interesting point and I wanted to address it because there's a certain element of that. We do this week in, week out, we get a week off once in a while, but ultimately it's, I think, 42 weeks a year that we're doing one of these. And I'm not going to lie, when I look at the card 2 or 3 weeks down the road to kind of start getting my mind at it, I'm like, oh man, I don't even know who a third of these people are. And I watch every single UFC event and most regional promotions. Like, what the hell? Or like, how is Francisco Trinaldo fighting again? But by the time I get to actual prep and tape study, I'm excited no matter what. Even if I'm watching tape on a debuting fighter that I know is not good and is not going to stick, it just makes me start thinking of how funny it's going to be to talk about it. Like, we have Ailin Perez's second UFC fight on this card. Ahead of her first fight, I watched her fighting on like those interlocking foam preschool mats. I was like, oh man, this is going to be fun to throw out there. Or, if we're talking about marginal UFC level fighters, I like the dynamic where I'll be like, well, I'm not sure, how many things this guy does at a UFC level. He's marginal at best. And then Keith will just drop in with, this guy sucks. And it just makes my day. So, I mean, even with the bad fights or the not great fighters, there's value, in it for me. And of course, a couple times a year, we get one of those fights that just reminds you why you love this sport. Like when you listen to Keith and me talk for 25 or 30 minutes about, Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira or Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira, I hope you can feel just the joy we take from this sport just coming right off of us. All the joking aside and not being afraid to call things bad when they're bad, this sport at its best moments just offers something that not many other entertainment industries do.
Yeah, so I'll say this, and I know I speak for both of us. Yeah, we don't sugarcoat how we feel about a card, but like, don't get me wrong, MMA is the greatest sport in the world by a mile. And I will say a million things wrong with the sport, but it's still the best sport in the world.
Sure.
You can give me Super Bowls, you can give me World Cups, you can give me World Series, all this stuff. Give me a UFC title fight. I'll take that over anything.
I agree. And I love like your regular team sports, stick and ball sports. I grew up loving boxing. We both love amateur wrestling, but gun to my head, one last event to watch. Give me a great MMA card with like some historically good title fights.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And as far as like the preview always feels like work to me because
it is work.
Throughout the week, I know I have to spend this much time on Monday, this much time on Tuesday, this much time on Wednesday, like so I can kind of get in as much as I can. And sometimes it doesn't always go like that. Like I'm glad you brought this up. This is probably the least prepared I am and I don't say least prepared. No, it's pretty bad. I didn't get to watch it. My life has been crazy. I'm hoping today is the last day of the craziness because we got a huge card coming up right after this. So
yeah.
That said, when I say least prepared, like I still watch more film than 99% of the people out there that, so we watch more tape study than anybody. I truly believe that. So the preview always feels like work, but then there's sometimes when I'm breaking down and I don't mind when I get to the actual taping the show. That doesn't matter. Sometimes I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, oh man, it's pretty late. I got to get up early in the morning. But the fights where we get I used to do a show with John Franklin before I did previews. And I couldn't do this now, so don't ask for it to come back just because of the time we have to put in for the previews. But I used to show that would be like almost 2 hours long talking about just the main event. Now it wasn't just a prediction show. We get into the ramifications, backstories, all kinds of stuff. So we would do just a UFC pay-per-view title fight. And it was like 2 hours long.
Yeah.
So those fights get me super excited. And we tape pretty early on purpose to kind of give us both a little bit of flexibility in case something happens in life. We're not screwed because poor timing before we'd lose some shelf life. Yeah. The bad thing is we could break down Islam Makhachev and Alex Volkanovski, and now I have like 10 days to wait for it to actually happen.
Exactly.
As far as a recap show, if people are familiar with the recap, that never feels like work to me. That just feels like fun.
I mean, that's what I'd be doing anyway if any three of our listeners were sitting on my couch.
What I have noticed is after I spend, hour and a half, 2 hours recapping, sometimes 2.5 hours recapping an event, the next day when I see people and they want to talk to me about the event, I'm like, I don't have the energy anymore.
I'm out. I'm all done.
I did, 20 hours of tape study. I did, a 3-hour show. Then I had to watch the event, which was 6 hours. And then I did a 2-hour recap. Like, no, I'm good. Go to YouTube, go to ShareDog and you see all my opinions.
I'm totally with you there. Like by middle of the day on Monday, I'm pretty burnt out on the card that just took place, and already I'm already geared up, going full steam ahead at the next one for sure. Absolutely. This card, throwing out a letter grade. I feel like I'm going to give it a higher letter grade than the average fan would because there are a couple of fighters on here that I know personally or have interacted with and just kind of have a place in my heart for them. There is the return, we hope, knock on wood, of Tatiana fucking Suarez. Yeah. And then, for a fight night main card, the top two fights here are pretty damn good. Like Andre Muniz versus Brendan Allen rips.
I think that should be the main event.
In terms of who's closest to to a title shot if they win, it absolutely should be. Andre Muniz could have slid into one after his last win. He was one rolled ankle away from probably getting the call to somebody, I agree with you. I mean, Krylov and Spann definitely have more kind of name value. They're physically, bigger fighters in a bigger weight class. Krylov's been in the UFC forever. Spann's a contender series guy. So I understand.
They're both finishers too, the big time finishers. Yeah.
Yeah. I understand why the order is what it is, but on strict merit, Muniz is probably the guy. I mean, hell, honestly, if Tatiana Suarez shows up and looks in vintage form and just breaks Montana De La Rosa off, she might be the closest person. Just destroy De La Rosa, throw her physically out of the cage, and say, Valentina Shevchenko, you took everything I've worked for. Shit.
She could.
And the entire strawweight division will just breathe a sigh of relief.
Yeah. Or we could also be seeing like Patchy Mix fight and go, oh, remember her? Like, yeah, she came back for that one fight and then got hurt again.
I don't even want to jump ahead to that yet. Should we just dive into these fights more or less in order?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. The card here is currently in a little bit of flux just because there were some fairly late substitutions and rearrangements made. But at least as I'm currently looking at it, this is set up as the opening bout. It is a lightweight matchup between Erick, the Ghost Pepper Gonzalez, and Trevor Peek. Gonzalez, the 31-year-old Californian, is 14-7 overall. He is 0-2 since joining the UFC out of Combate Americas, now Combate Global. He debuted back in 2021, got knocked out early in the second round by the ageless Jim Miller, came back last August and got choked out in less than half a round by Terrence McKinney. So he'll be looking not to start his UFC run on 3 straight losses. Standing in his way will be Peek. The 28-year-old Alabama native is 7-0 with 1 no contest. He is making his UFC debut. He won on the Contender Series last September, knocking out Malik Lewis in the second round. Both of these gentlemen were actually scheduled to fight other people, but the UFC almost accidentally hedged its own bets. Gonzalez was going to be fighting Darius Flowers, another Contender Series veteran. Peek was going to be fighting Alex Reyes. Flowers and Reyes both fell off. It was all lightweights, so the UFC just matched up the 2 remaining guys. The odds do favor the debuting fighter here. Peek is -175, Gonzalez +145. Keith, sometimes a bout accidentally falls together that ends up being just kind of a fortuitous thing. This is honestly probably going to be a more fun fight than either of the 2 component fights are going to be, as these are 2 guys that are probably just going to stand and bang. Problem is, one of them has proven to be a little better at it, at least against the level of competition he's been facing. Gonzalez, and I've said this for the whole 2 years or so we've been doing these previews, he was one of the guys I was most excited to see come out of Combate and see what he could do in the UFC. And thus far, the answer is not a whole lot. It's been a rough run for him. His loss to Jim Miller back, now a year and a half ago, it's remembered as, hey, this is the beginning of Jim Miller's comeback, his, multiple straight wins with finishes. But not only did Miller knock him out, Miller beat him up in the first round too, and just straight up beat him up on the feet, like beat him to the punch repeatedly. That's not something a 30-year-old fighter should be saying, that, Jim Miller outquicked and outslicked me on the feet. That's not a good sign. I'm more inclined to give him a pass for the Terrence McKinney fight, just because I have the feeling that quick strike submissions is going to end up being what McKinney ends up best at and what keeps him in the UFC, or what, determines how far he can go. But against Trevor Peek, I feel like Gonzalez is kind of tailor-made for him. Peek is a slugger. He does kick, but he leans on his hands for most of his power. I would be concerned if I thought Gonzalez, might be willing or able to take him down. Peek has had some trouble with that. The few people who slowed him down on the regional scene, and certainly Lewis on the Contender Series, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think these guys are probably just going to stand, trade, swing and hope for a $50,000 bonus. But I think it'll be Peek picking up his win bonus. Give me Peek by first round knockout here.
Yeah, this is an intriguing fight simply because it's probably pretty good matchup, being that they're both kind of lower level guys. I mentioned that a lot of times about Erick Gonzalez as being a lower level UFC talent. I don't even know if he's even that at this point. His run when he's faced upper echelon, not even say upper echelon guys, but like higher quality guys, he's struggled. He's lost to guys like Humberto Bondanay, Rafael Garcia. He got starched by Jim Miller, which again, UFC debut against someone like Jim Miller, it's not too bad. Got ran through by Terrence McKinney. Again, better UFC talent. So those other 2 fights, though, is what bothers me even more. What he does, he fights out of both stances. He's got some good volumes. He throws a lot of winging, sloppy shots, and he doesn't really have that much power for a guy who throws a lot of power shots. I think his best weapon is probably the kicks from the southpaw stance. He has a lot of defensive holes. He drops his hands. He gets hit a lot. He doesn't check leg kicks. He's a terrible defensive wrestler. He can catch some subs, but he's been submitted, including in his last fight. And chin has been an issue as he's been starched pretty easily. Now, move to Peak. I'm sorry. I looked up Trevor Peak, and I accidentally put Trevor Peck, and there was a guy who was 0-4 in his career. And I'm like, damn, the UFC is really digging low.
Yeah, but you didn't immediately dismiss the idea that they had signed him.
Yeah, I was like, what's going on? Is he like some kind of celebrity I don't know about? So all his wins are by stoppage, which is something you like. I like that he knocked out Worthy, which before getting the UFC, going to face someone like that. He's an aggressive striker. He throws really hard. He tends to load up, and he throws a lot of haymakers, but he's got good power. Now, he can overthrow and leave himself open to counters. He also has this he bob and weaves, but to avoid shots, but he over exaggerates his bob and weaves, which is great for boxing, where really they can only throw an uppercut. But in MMA, knees, kicks, he's going to get clipped against a really good striker. He has some hard kicks. He'll sneak in a takedown every once in a while. He's got some pretty good ground and pound. He was hurt bad, though, in his last fight on the Dana White Contender Series. But he showed an ability to recover and to come back. He showed tons of hot. I mean, it wasn't just like he was dropped. He was rocked. I mean, the guy was going for the kill. So he showed, a lot of grit to come back and win. He also showed good cardio. So I'm not high on either guy. I just made my mind up a while ago is that I'm just not picking Erick Gonzalez anymore in the UFC. Not that I ever did. So I'll go with the UFC newcomer. I think he's got the best chance of winning by KO. So I say he lays, they both throw some big haymakers. I say he lands the cleaner one, the harder one. I say he puts him out. So give me Peak by first round KO.
Next up at UFC Fight Night 220 is a bantamweight matchup between Jose Johnson and Garrett Armfield. Johnson, the 27-year-old Michigan native, is 15-7 overall. This will be his UFC debut. He's appeared twice on Dana White's Contender Series. He was there in the 2020 season where he lost to Ronnie Lawrence, came back last season, faced Jack Cartwright in August and beat him by unanimous decision. That punched his ticket to the UFC, where he will meet Armfield, a man still looking for his first win in the octagon. Armfield, 26-year-old native of Missouri, is 8-3 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC. In his defense, he stepped in on short notice up a weight class against David Onama, who himself had joined the UFC by stepping in on short notice up a weight class. So at least they paid it forward. But it ended predictably as Onama put him away in the second round, choking him all the way to sleep with an arm triangle. Armfield is back. He's back in his natural weight class, and he is favored here. Armfield is -165, Johnson +135 on the comeback. I am excited to see Armfield here at bantamweight. I don't know if he has staying power in the UFC in either of those two divisions. I mean, 135 and 145 are just, they're seeing a bumper crop of great prospects right now. But whatever chance he has is better at 135 because he is a bit of a wrestle boxer. Comes from, a wrestling background. He has solid entries, solid single leg, double leg. He's become a classic wrestle boxer in that, has a good overhand with good power, like a lot of wrestlers do. I feel like we talked on a recent recap about this it might have been one of my other shows, but like the point was that
you have another show? How dare you?
It's terrible, but okay. But like the point was that wrestlers who cross over to striking, some of them do it the right way. And, in a way that really works with what a wrestler naturally wants to do. Like wrestlers, they want to be heavy on the front foot generally. And so it leads itself to things like, throwing an overhand right, because, there's a way to kind of like disguise whether you're doing the level change or the punch as well when you're coming forward.
Kamaru Usman's really good at hiding his entries behind his striking.
Yeah, it's sensational. For a hot minute, Johnny Hendricks was, You know, he had George St. Pierre of all people frozen for long moments, you know, with that.
Cejudo was really good at it too.
Cejudo's fantastic. Like however much of a clown and goofball he may be, like the dude's an incredible fighter.
Well, obviously the best at it is though.
Who? Bo Nickel.
Bo Nickel.
Of course. Ding, ding,
gotta
ding.
get in there early.
Oh, well, no. And the counterexample that was brought up was King Mo, where he was a super elite wrestler, but he picked up this really like nifty, like side to side bob and weave style.
Yeah, trying to roll with punches.
Yeah. And it didn't make him a better wrestler or striker. You know, it was just kind of a pain.
Yeah. Cause he probably spent time with like boxers who don't understand the in and outs of MMA, where that's great boxing technique, but
yeah,
the game is different. You need to be with a striker who understands the MMA style.
Yeah. Agreed. Here, I think this is Armfield's fight to win, assuming he is willing to lean on his wrestling. Johnson is a tall and lanky bantamweight, to put it mildly, and some tall, skinny fighters develop good takedown defense, but Johnson has not proven that to be the case thus far. If Armfield just wants to stand and bang, you know, I do think he will be able to get inside of Johnson's reach, probably touch him some, but he'll put himself at more risk there as well. If he decides to wrestle, I think he's going to be able to put Johnson down pretty easily and either kind of chip away and advance position and stay busy enough to win rounds that way, or maybe actually hurt him. I'm leaning that way. I'm taking Armfield by decision here.
This is an interesting matchup. Johnson was a guy that I did research on a long time ago on the Contender Series, and then he returned, and I saw better cardio, but nothing else really that much better. He's a long and lengthy fighter. He throws straight punches right down the pipe. I'd say good power. He's got like 8 or 9 knockouts, a lot of kicks, teep kicks, calf kicks, quick high kick. I like his step in knees. That's probably my favorite part of his game. Defensively, though, he pillars, he backs straight up. He will shoot for a takedown. So he's not just a striker, but he really needs to improve his top control. Like you see him, like even his last fight in the Contender Series, it was like sloppy scrambles. He arguably lost that one. Like I wasn't scoring it. I was watching just, you know, his technique, more focusing on him, but it was a very back and forth fight. Very weak defensive wrestler. He has those long legs, so he can toss up subs off his back. He likes to throw like a triangle choke and stuff. But because of that, he really struggles to get off from bottom and spends long periods there. Armfield made his UFC debut on a really short notice, so I could give him a little bit of pass. He also got a tough foe in David Onama. He's not a great athlete, but I like what he does on the feet. He's got good volume. He keeps everything short, tight, just kind of touches, doesn't overextend, just uses his striking to kind of get to the pocket, where, you know, that's when he starts opening up power shots. And then he looks to wrestle too. He can wrestle. Surprisingly, a weaker defensive wrestler than I would expect for a guy who can get some offensive takedowns. And I am a little worried that he was submitted by David Onama in his debut. I've never really been high on Johnson. He has some qualities, I'll say that, but he's too sloppy for my liking, especially on the ground. Now, Armfield isn't like some wizard on the ground or anything like that. And I'm not going to pretend like I've seen so much film of him that I have a really strong opinion on him. But I'm still going to go with Armfield. I don't know if I like his skills. I know I don't like Johnson's skills. So give me Armfield by decision.
We head now to the women's bantamweight division for a matchup between Hailey Cowan and Ailin Perez. Cowan, the 31-year-old Waco, Texas native, is making her UFC debut after winning her way into the UFC on Dana White's Contender Series last August, where she took a split decision over Claudia Leite. She will be facing Perez, who made her own debut last fall. 28-year-old Argentinian is 7-2 overall. She is 0-1 since joining the UFC as a veteran of Samurai Fight League. She debuted on short notice against Stephanie Egger. Got choked out in the second round, so she'll be looking for her first octagon win. And she is not favored to do so. Cowan, minus 155. Perez, plus 125. Hailey Cowan, I went to Waco to cover UFC to cover LFA 63. The UFC touches down in Waco, Texas. No.
I got to tell a story. I know that we'll have to do stories. No, finish yours and I'll tell you story time with Keith. It's going to be a longer story.
Okay. This one fairly short. I went to cover LFA 63 out in Waco back in March of 2019. So coming up on 4 years ago. That was Hailey Cowan's third or fourth professional fight. She already was a superstar out there. She's someone, she was like a national champion tumbler at Baylor, which is in Waco. Her crossover to MMA was like big news out there. Like her t-shirts and swag outnumbered that of like all the other fighters on the bill, like combined. And that included like some LFA, like mainstay fighters, like, people like Derek Krantz, but she won. And I had a chance to interview her, and I kind of pegged her as someone like, if she wins just a couple more, she's going to be in the UFC soon, and it'll be interesting to see what she can do. That was one of the ones where the Contender Series was there scouting for talent. Like that's, Dana White and Dean Thomas and Matt Serra were there. And so I'm not surprised to see that Cowan is now in the UFC, but honestly, I would have expected her to have developed a little more and been a little better by now, because she had a tremendous upside at the time. She was 27 years old and a world-class athlete in at least a sport. I know that there, like from gymnastics or tumbling, there's not many direct lines to MMA, but you look at her, she is yoked. She is like a serious athlete, and was already racking up like head kick knockouts and, had a developing submission game. But 4 years later, she's more or less the same fighter she was. She's moved up from 125 to 135, which I think makes all the sense in the world because she is big.
She's a big one.
I mean, she reminds
the opposite of most gymnastics people.
Yeah. No, it's the thing you hear about Holly Holm that, from 50 yards away, she just looks like, hey, that looks like a very in shape, like nice, attractive woman. And then when you're 3 feet away, you're like, oh, you got muscles. Like,
oh yeah.
And
she has the most beautiful hair.
Oh, her hair rules, but yeah.
That's unbelievable. I've met her a couple times. Okay. It's like,
yeah. Hailey Cowan's awesome. And she has
I was talking about Holly Holm. Holly Holm.
Well,
it's like hypnotizing me.
She's a hypnotic woman. Cowan, I mean, the Holm type of star power like was and is therefore, she has that same sort of like all-American like blonde jock girl appeal.
Oh,
but
yeah, absolutely.
She's still a pretty basic fighter in terms of skills. She has an effective offensive wrestling game that just runs on being big and strong. Like, she's a plus athlete, but she's not an off the charts plus athlete for MMA. She's not like a fast twitch freak. I mean, we're going to be talking about Tatiana Suarez in a few minutes. She's not Tatiana Suarez.
I think her athleticism is pretty good. Okay. But anyways.
Hey, that's one of the times that like Keith is going to like come out and like be higher on a fighter than me. Good natural power in her strikes, but all the things she's got going on, it's almost irrelevant here because this should be a slam dunk of a matchup for her. Ailin Perez, I've gone on at length ahead of her UFC debut, but I mean, she came up fighting miserable opposition, and against Stephanie Egger, a fighter who is not naturally as big as Perez, she just got molested on the ground.
Yeah.
Here, I'm picking Cowan by decision because I think it's a wait and see for me to see if like Cowan is going to have finishing ability at the UFC bantamweight level. But I think if Perez wants to strike, which he typically does at least early on until she's forced to try to go to the ground, I think Cowan is going to be able to outland her. And I think if Cowan wants to fight on the ground, she's going to be able to kind of ragdoll Perez where the reverse is not true. So give me Cowan here in a pretty dominant decision.
Wow. My mind was doing so many things while you were talking. I just kept thinking about like, what would happen if Simone Biles went to MMA? Like, how would she do? Yeah.
Well, the UFC would finally have to open up an atomweight class.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think she weighs like 100 pounds.
Yeah, and yeah. So Hailey Cowan, she trains in Waco. Let me give you a quick Waco story. So
Can't wait.
When I visited my uncle in Dallas, I think we were doing the show then. This is like May 2021, maybe roughly.
Yeah, like I remember.
Yeah.
Like,
so I visited my uncle in Dallas, and we went to Dallas. Went to a couple other spots. We went to Fort Worth, which I absolutely love. I would move to Fort Worth tomorrow. And one place we went to check out was Waco, but we doing other things. And while we're there, I go, like, where was the Branch Davidians like thing? And he's like, I don't know. So I stopped playing on my phone, and I'm like, dude, it says we're like a mile away. I'm like, can I just see like the field that it happened? They're like, yeah, sure. We drove there. They rebuilt the place. So there's like a buzzer, and we're like, what the hell? We're on vacation. Hit the buzzer. Start talking to them. They're like, yeah, we'll give you a tour. They open the thing and we go in. It's just us. It's like me, my uncles, my dad. It's like 8 of us, 10 of us. They're all like, I mean, it's Texas, but it's also the Branch Davidians walking around with guns and everything. It's a little different for a New Englander. And they rebuilt the church, and they still have like the part. You go inside and it's all like anti-Biden stuff and really whatever, like crazy Branch Davidian stuff. So there's this guy outside, and there's like this main guy kind of like telling us about, but he's like, they're telling us about the history, but more like preaching their religion to us, like trying to convert us. And they tell us about the church, like, oh, there's like 20 people come every Sunday. I'm like, really? So I just didn't think it existed anymore. So that's I come around, and there's this guy. He's probably like 50, and he's like a little kid, and he's like talking, like they're like working in a field. And he's like, hey, you need help with anything? And it's right where the old like pool was, the original pool. So I start talking to the guy, and he's telling me about, and I'm like, were you there? He's like, yeah, I was there. And I'm like, you were there tonight? He's like, yeah, I was one of the survivors. And I'm saying like, holy shit. And the guy's telling me all these stories, but he's also like crazy. Like, so anyways, that's not we go back to my uncle's house. And this is like later, we were there like 2 p.m. This is like 11 o'clock at night. My uncle puts on like a Branch Davidian documentary. And the guy I was talking to is on the documentary. But that's not the craziest part. He was the guy who shot one of the ATF guys. And he was the guy that they had negotiated to come out.
Holy shit.
And this is the guy I'm talking to. Like, it was just me, him, and some random little kid.
Damn.
Yeah. And he got out of prison. He did spend like the little like ending, and 35 people died or whatever. And this guy served 22 years or whatever. So that's story.
Wild, dude.
I told you it was a little longer. It was a story time with Keith. Anyways, back to the. Sorry, I apologize to all the listeners that just wants me to talk about MMA. Can't wait for my breakdown of Cowan. Cowan's really.
No, we're gonna get one dude that's like, give us more Branch Davidian content. Like, yeah. Can you guys do a show from Waco?
Is that a thing? Is that a thing for like Europe? Does Europe know about like? Is that? I know it was a big news story in US. Is that a story like with like Europe, and they know about that?
The one European I talked who talked to me about it pronounced it wacko, and I couldn't say he was wrong.
That fits.
Yeah,
that fits. The wackos in Waco. So it's funny that Cowan, you mentioned moving up. Like, she's a big woman for the weight. Like, she's big. I think she's a great athlete. I disagree with that. She's a southpaw. She's light on her feet. She's got good output, long distance strikes. Her hands are pretty fast. I like her like check right hook, and I like her kick game. She's got great kicks, quick high kick. She has that like Holly Holm side kick that she does. She doesn't check leg kicks, but she does mix in her punches and her kicks together in combinations. She's very physically strong, so she can grind in the clinch. She looks for elbows. On the Contender Series, she cut up her opponent with a really nice elbow. Good knees from the plum clinch. She's not much of an offensive wrestler, but when she is on top, she shows some decent controls and good ground and pound. But as you mentioned, she's a weak defensive wrestler, and that's the big thing that worries me about her. She struggles to get back up. Even on the Contender Series, she struggled to get back up. She gave up her back at times. She almost got head and arm triangled in her Contender Series matchup. In her 2 losses, she's been submitted. Now, Ailin Perez, you mentioned her facing some really bad competition. Like, Hailey Cowan grew up doing junior high tumbling. Ailin Perez grew up fighting junior high tumbler. That was her competition.
That explains the mats.
Yeah,
they were just a gym class. Samurai Fight League is actually like a high school gym class.
Yeah. So some things I'll say. She's very aggressive on the feet. She kind of bull rushes forward at her opponents, almost fearless. She wants to get in that pocket. She's got pretty fast hands. She throws combos. She throws hard. She'll toss out some spinning attacks. I actually like her wrestling more than you. Yeah, she did get submitted by Stephanie Egger, and she got thrown a couple times, but she had a takedown, 1 or 2 takedowns of Stephanie Egger. She's physically strong. She will shoot without a setup, which is concerning. But if she gets on top, she shows some mean ground and pound in the past. Again, what is that worth against the competition she beat? I don't know, but she had moments against Stephanie Egger, who I like way better than Cowan. Cowan has the higher ceiling for sure of these two people. She's way more tactical. She has way more avenues of victory. But she also has a very glaring weakness, and that's her inability to get off the bottom. And Perez can put her there. It's very possible that Cowan just styles on Perez. But I'm going the other way, man. I want to go with the upset. I want to say Perez hits a few takedowns, lands some hard shots on top. I say we have a back and forth fight, but give me Perez in an upset. I'll take her by split decision.
There we go. A little bit of dissension on one of the UFC Vegas 70 prelims. We head now to the men's flyweight division for a matchup between Ode Osbourne and short notice replacement opponent Charles Johnson. Osbourne, the 31-year-old Wisconsin native, is 11-5 with 1 no contest overall. He is 3-3 since joining the UFC out of the 3rd season of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost his last time out. It was a first-round knockout at the heavy hands of Tyson Nam back in August. That snapped a 2-fight winning streak for him against CJ Vergara and Zaruka Dashev. He had been scheduled to fight Denise Bondar at UFC Fight Night 220. Bondar was forced to withdraw from the card about 2 weeks out, and he is replaced by Johnson. The 32-year-old St. Louis native by way of Detroit is 13-3 overall. He is 2-1 in the UFC. He joined the UFC with a tall order as a short notice replacement opponent against Muhammad Mokaev. Acquitted himself fairly well in defeat, dropped a unanimous decision, and since then he has won 2 in a row. One of those, a split decision over Zhalgas Zhumagulov last November at UFC Fight Night, Zechikwu versus Kudalaba, and then came back this January and knocked out the returning Jimmy Flick in the first round. That was at UFC Fight Night, Strickland versus Imavov. Poor Osbourne just can't seem to catch a break. He was a pretty strong underdog against Bondar. In steps Johnson on short notice, and he's a 2-1 favorite too. Johnson minus 190, Osbourne plus 155. Keith, different opponent for Ode Osbourne, different result. Can he get it done against Johnson? Who you got in this one?
Yeah, I'm surprised by that line. Like, I don't ever look at the betting lines, and I actually would have thought, I don't know if I would have said that Osbourne would be a favorite, but I thought it was going to be really close on the betting lines. And against Bondar, I definitely would have thought Osbourne would be the favorite. I do agree that I think the fight got a little tougher. Osbourne, he's a southpaw who's long and lengthy. He likes to fight from range. He's got, I'd say, high volume. It's kind of like a controlled aggression. Like, he comes forward, but it's very controlled. But he's always, inching closer and closer. Quick hands, pretty accurate, pretty explosive. He throws a lot of combos. I love his check right hook from distance. He's got good power. He will do some dumb stuff, like throwing out spinning attacks. He was also continued to jump in the air against Tyson Nam, and then Tyson Nam made him pay for it. In a fight that he probably going back in in hindsight, he probably should have won that fight. Like he's I still think he's a better fighter than Tyson Nam, but
he gave Nam the one thing that Nam does really well.
Yeah, like don't put yourself in that position. He throws some hard calf kicks, but he does plant his legs, leave himself open to leg attacks. I mean, it kind of goes both ways. You generate power that way, but in MMA, it kicks out your legs. He relies on his head movement, but he pulls his head straight back. And we saw when you have a sniper like Manel Kopp, he's going to time that and put you out. I like that he's been wrestling a little bit more, and I definitely that's the advantage he has against Johnson. That's probably his best avenue of victory, is turn this into a wrestling match. He's got some pretty good ground and pound. He's got 4 submission wins. I hate that I saw one fight where he dropped down on an ankle lock when he was in dominant position. And you got to start questioning his chin. It's been, I think it's not back-to-back fights, but Kopp and Tyson Nam both starched him.
Yeah, both put him down.
Yeah, fairly recently. Johnson, I thought he lost to Zumagulov. It wasn't a robbery or anything like that, but I just want to mention that. But that said, against Jimmy Flick, I thought he looked sensational. He's a plus athlete that moves well, pretty elusive. He's a moving target, so he's constantly moving, which makes him hard to hit. He also fights out of both stances, so it's hard to time him. I also like how he cuts angles. He doesn't always keep coming straight at you. He'll cut like to a side. He's a kickboxer with high volume. Doesn't waste unnecessary energy because he just touches, and he waits for an opening. In fairness, he isn't the biggest like one punch knock you out kind of guy. Like that's not his game. He's more of a guy that beats you with variety in his striking, which I like. He uses all of his weapons. Kicks are a big part of his game. He loves teep kicks. He will throw some kicks without a setup, which will leave him open to counters, which could be the biggest issue against a power puncher like O'Day Osbourne. I love that he throws step-in knees. I think his head movement's decent, though he does sometimes like to roll with punches, which I'm not a fan of, and especially because rolling doesn't really help you when someone pressures you, like a Zumagulov, because your feet are very stationary and so kind of a little bit off balance. He's not much of a wrestler, but he will look for a takedown. Usually, he'll be smart, catch a kick or something, and try to take it down from there. He showed some improved takedown defense against Zumagulov, some good ground and pound against Jimmy Flick. He does have 3 subs on his record, and I like that if he's taken down, he's persistent to work back to his feet. Cardio to go 15 minutes, and he's even gone 25 minutes in the LFA. So I flip-flop this pick a lot. That's why I think the line should be much closer. Osbourne is the more explosive guy, while Johnson is the more technical guy. I feel like Osbourne has been a bit of an underachiever in the UFC, while Johnson maybe be a little bit of an overachiever. I don't like that Johnson is taking this on short notice. Plus, Osbourne should have the wrestling advantage. And I still think even though Osbourne has been knocked out recently, I still think Osbourne might be the guy that could more likely to land one shot and end the fight. That said, Johnson has grown on me a little bit, and he's just shown that he's a gamer. And this is a guy that I wasn't crazy about coming in, and he finds ways to win close fights, which I don't know if Osbourne has that. So I think Johnson survives in the early big shots from Osbourne, and then I think he takes over with his volume and picks up the later rounds. So I'll say, I'm not super confident, so I'll go Johnson by split decision.
I feel a lot of the same things that you're kind of throwing down about this fight, even down to, or maybe especially down to the idea that Osbourne, either has underachieved or just he's had matchups that like have reflected badly on him, because you look over his record in the UFC. He's 3-3. None of his wins are great shakes, but none of his losses are all that terrible either. Like, he debuted up a weight class against Brian Kelleher and got guillotined. 1, Kelleher's a pretty good fighter. 2, Kelleher was a weight class bigger. 3, even though he's got kind of like that Northeast like tough guy demeanor and his nickname is Boom, he has more subs than knockouts. Like, Brian Kelleher is a quick strike submission artist. He got starched by Kopp, but you know what? Kopp's a top 5 fighter, and he blew weight for that fight. Okay, yeah, jumping into the air and getting swatted by Tyson Nam wasn't great. In fact, between that and going for ill-advised heel hooks, like he really is just like the small Andrei Arlovsky, isn't he? Like, Johnson, I think I was a little higher on Johnson coming in than you were. Like, obviously, Muhammad Mokaev was just a terrible like first test in the UFC, but I was like, Johnson is somebody that I thought we might see in the UFC in 2022, or or at least the Contender Series anyway. He at least hung in there tough against Mokaev, and then since then he's looked pretty good. He beat Zhumagulov by split decision, but that's going to go on Zhumagulov's tombstone. I lost by split decision. Like, Zhumagulov had one of the most unlucky UFC runs ever.
Him and Courtney Casey. I mean, it is possible to snap out of that. I mean, once upon a time we would have said that about Jorge Masvidal, but he looked great against Jimmy Flick. Basically, made it look like he shouldn't have come out of retirement. I lean more heavily towards Johnson if this weren't on short notice. I mean, he is a big, big flyweight. One of the tallest guys in the division, and not a beanpole. No, that's a good point.
And that's why I'm actually leaning towards the upset here. I'm
thinking the opposite of these fights.
Yeah. I don't know if Osbourne's gonna knock him out, but I think he'll land the heavier shots, especially early on. And Johnson just maybe he isn't able to throw his accustomed volume for 3 full rounds. Maybe he isn't able to dig a little deeper and pull out rounds 2 and 3 when he needs them. Because I'm pretty comfortable with Osbourne winning the first round, and all else being equal, Johnson having the short notice. I'm thinking Osbourne will be like strong enough late to hold on and win. So give me Osbourne by decision as well, but I don't have a ton of confidence in this pick. Next up, the lightweights take the cage once again, as it is Jordan Leavitt versus Victor Martinez. Leavitt, the 27-year-old Californian now training out of Las Vegas, I believe, is 10-2 overall. He is 3-2 since joining the UFC out of the 2020 season of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost his last time out, got choked out in the second round by Paddy Pimblett. That snapped a 2-fight winning streak for him against Matt Sales and Trey Ogden. So he'll be looking to get back on track here against the debuting Martinez. The 31-year-old from Texas's Rio Grande Valley is 13-4 overall. He won his way onto the Contender Series, or he won his way into the UFC on the Contender Series last September, taking a unanimous decision over Jacob Rosales. He is also a former Fury FC lightweight champ. He is the slightest of underdogs here. Martinez plus 105, Leavitt minus 135. Once again, showing that even though Texas is a big place, Texas is also a small place. I've seen Vic Martinez fight a couple of times in person, interviewed him a few times. If it is possible to step in to the UFC for your first real UFC fight and have no octagon jitters, Vic Martinez will be the guy that has no octagon jitters, because he has already been in the UFC octagon about 15 times as the longtime training partner and corner second of Diego Ferreira. He lives down in the Rio Grande Valley, like far Texas, like literally right on the border with Mexico, where Diego Ferreira does. They both train down there and then split their own camps at Fortis. First time I saw Vic Martinez fight, it was in Corpus Christi. That's about halfway between here and Mexico from where I live. That was for the Fury FC lightweight title. I actually went down there because one of my friends, Nico Echeverry, was fighting Martinez. Martinez knocked him out in the second round. It's like a flash knockdown. Ref jumped in and stopped it. I thought it was a bad stoppage, but that doesn't change that Vic did what he was supposed to do. And then I went to the Combate Tito versus Alberto card a couple years ago. And that was in his hometown. Like, I drove all the way down to the Rio Grande Valley. It was like a 6 or 7 hour drive for me. And Vic,
I drive anywhere to see Tito Ortiz.
Dude, I'm glad I got to see him because, obviously he was a full.
Yeah, who's crazy? The guy I talked to at Waco, Tito Ortiz.
I mean, Tito Ortiz is functional enough that he actually ran for office and won, a city council position. Okay. That's saying something, but it's still an open question.
I'm just making a joke, guys. So don't at me.
But having said that, I mean, obviously he was 15 years past his fighting prime. He'd been, to fans who came to the sport in a certain era, more of a punchline than anything for the goofy things he did and said. But dude, he still electrifies a room. Like, that arena exploded when he walked out. And he walked out to his Hulk Hogan music, like waving his Mexican flag in one hand and his American flag. Or no, it's on the pole. That's the one that has the Mexican flag on the back and the American one on the front. Had the flaming beanie. Dude, the beanie.
Nice. I love it. He was like the epitome of cool. I don't know. What was it?
2003?
Okay,
by 03, everyone already thought he was ducking Chuck. Yeah, more like 2000.
2001. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
2000.
Oh yeah, right after September 11th when he came out. Oh yeah.
Yeah. 01. Yeah. There you go.
Because that's when he fought Ken Shamrock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was the face of MMA at one time.
It is an artifact of the days when I was a volunteer / semi-pro at this thing. But here is my Team Ferreira Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu workout top, and it is fightwear of Vic the Brick Martinez.
There you go.
There we go. Obviously, Brick rhymes with Vic, but it also applies to his hands. He is a boxer by preference, and the dude does throw bricks. Hard hitter at 155. Liabilities, I mean, he's not a spectacular athlete, and he makes it worse by kind of having a plodding, shuffling approach. He really moves like a boxer. It's kind of like a lightweight version of Rampage, like where by the time Rampage hit his early 30s, like he had become just sort of a plodding fighter and more of a pure boxer. That's Vic Martinez. But, if he sticks in the UFC, he's a guy that is going to hurt a lot of people with his hands. Problem is, he can be taken down. And oddly, for a guy that's been training with Diego Ferreira for like a decade, he can be exploited there. He won the Fury title, by knocking out Echeverry, but he lost the first round because Echeverry took him down, advanced position, took his back, had his back at the horn. So this is pretty clearly a classic style matchup here. Jordan Leavitt is a better striker than he was when Keith unleashed one of my favorite lines in the history of the Shillan and Duffy previews, but he's not that much better. And some grapplers that never become great strikers and end up needing to take a lot of punishment in order to get the fight to the ground are good at taking punishment. Like you get Paul Craig and Damian Maia that, just have legendarily good chins and recoverability. Leavitt ain't that. Like Leavitt gets hurt and stays hurt. For me, Leavitt needs to get this fight to the ground or he's going to get plunked by Martinez. If Leavitt does get Martinez to the ground with any appreciable amount of time left in the round, then Martinez is probably in trouble because Leavitt, he lost to a fellow specialist in Paddy Pimblett, who's probably just a better fighter and better at their shared specialty.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he is still a guy who just his physique creates matchup problems on the ground. He's creative. For a guy who's as slow and kind of shuffly as he is on the feet, he moves fast on the ground. He's fast in transition. To me, this is almost a coin flip, and the odds are pretty close. I'm leaning Martinez here. I think he's overdue to be in the UFC. I wouldn't have been surprised if he had been signed straight out of winning the Fury title back in 2019, but he had a couple of long layoffs for different reasons. Give me Martinez by first round knockout here, but it's not because I think he's 10 times better than Leavitt, because if you ask me what my second most likely outcome is, it's Leavitt by first round submission. It really is almost a coin flip to me, but give me Martinez.
Are you picking this because I'm from Texas and I'm friends with Vic Martinez, or is this?
It's hard for me to separate. I mean, I do have one of the guys like shirts like right here, but no, I do think that he brings something that Leavitt has not really shown he's going to be able to deal with. I'm
wearing a Bombers girls softball, makes my 12-year-old daughter, which makes you wonder who has better stand-up, Jordan Leavitt or my 12-year-old daughter. Back to this fight. Jordan, I don't even know where my notes are. Okay, Jordan Leavitt. So Jordan Leavitt. One thing about him, he's a big dude. Like he's big for the weight class. You mentioned his striking is improving, but it's still way below par. He is a one-dimensional fighter. He does land a little bit more because guys are expecting, worried about the takedown. I mean, he was having some success on the feet against Trey Ogden in their fight, but he keeps his chin still too high in the air. He will shoot for a takedown. He's definitely more of a funk style wrestler where he shoots and just try to create a scramble. Just kind of keeps his hips continue to move. And he's creative on the ways to get it down. If he can't drive through it, he'll Imanari roll. He'll pull guard. He doesn't care. He's very flexible. Got some good back takes. Has tons of submissions on his record. He can hit subs from every position, but I think the best part of his game is that he can hit subs during transitions. Like, for example, like a Darce choke. He can get you in Darce choke, which is kind of like his go-to choke.
The inverted triangle on sales.
There you go.
Yeah.
He will give up position and be compromised looking for a sub, which is an issue. And he is a submission threat, but I want to, and you kind of alluded to this, and I really want to point this out. He isn't an elite of the elite grappler. I mean, he was out grappled by Paddy Pimblett in their fight. I don't know if that was his last fight, but in their fight.
Mm-hmm. It was his last fight.
It was his fight. Okay. And he was submitted too. And cardio is an issue as he's gassed out in the Pimblett fight. He gassed out in the Claudio Puelles fight. Again, those are two good grapplers themselves. Victor Martinez, he's a shorter guy. He's a little soft in the midsection, but he's a high volume striker. He marches down his opponent. He gets in the pocket. He throws a lot of hooks, a lot of uppercuts. I definitely think the uppercut is what he's looking against Jordan Leavitt. I like that he goes to the body. He's got some good calf kicks, but he was rocked in the Contender Series matchup. He will sneak in a takedown, and he is a BJJ black belt. But as you mentioned, like Diego Fajeda is an amazing grappler. That might be, your Jeremy Jambi gets the contract if you need Jason Jambi kind of thing. He's a I don't know why I couldn't think of a better reference than that.
I like that. I need to bring Jeremy Jambi into our conversations more often when we're talking about like lesser brothers of great like MMA fighters.
I just found out that Randy Macho Man Savage had a brother. I didn't even know that.
Leaping Lanny Poffo, dude, was his brother. The guy that said the poems and threw the frisbees. He was my favorite jobber.
That's it. That was your favorite jobber.
Dude, I loved him because he would come out and he'd like read some poem that was like insulting his opponent, and he was a popular jobber, so they'd always let him get in like one big drop kick or one big move, and then just
because he's Macho Man,
yeah. But then like Brutus Beefcake or Adrian Adonis would just like crumple him into a ball, but yeah, no, it's like Randy Savage's real name is Randall Poffo, and Leaping Lanny Poffo was his brother. Yeah.
There you go. That's why Ben's the best in the business.
Labs fan, get at me.
Yeah, he's a weak defensive wrestler. He gave up his back on the Contender Series, but he has good cardio. So Leavitt is a favorite for a reason. Martinez has been taken down in the past. He gives up his back. Man, like I know this isn't the right pick. But I know I'm picking the wrong person. But I made a statement, and I'm a man of my word, that I refuse to pick Leavitt until I see better striking. I guess it's better, but fuck it. I say Martinez survives an early scare, like you said, which I think is probably the more likely outcome. I think he then sets a pace, lands some hard shots. I say he takes over in the second and the third. It's going to come down to that like really close second round. Like, does Leavitt get him down, hold him down for long periods of time? I'm going to say Martinez lands some big shots. I see he wins a split decision.
We stay in the lightweight division, or, well, knock on wood, we stay in the lightweight division, as it is Rafael Alves versus Nurullo Aliev coming up. Alves, the 32-year-old Brazilian, is 20-11 overall. He is 1-2 since joining the UFC out of the 2020 season of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost his debut to Damir Ismagulov by decision, came back with a first-round submission of Mark Diakiese, and most recently fought this past July at UFC 277, where he was put away with a liver punch by Drew Dober in the third round. That's 3 fights in 3 years almost for him, and in between have been a number of withdrawals due to various injuries and health issues, and one fight that was canceled because he weighed in 11 pounds over the lightweight limit, which until the advent of William Knight was the biggest weight miss in UFC history. But even still, in terms of percentage of body weight, it is substantially worse than William Knight coming in at 217 for a yeah.
There you go. That's in the debate. No pound for pound who's better, Makhachev and Volkanovski. That's the pound for pound debate we need to have. Well, Alves versus Knight.
It's worth noting. I mean, because you've got it all the way down the scale. Obviously, you've got Knight, who missed the light heavyweight limit by 12 pounds. Alves missed the lightweight limit by 11. Charles Oliveira once came in like 8 pounds over the featherweight limit, like closer to lightweight than featherweight.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh, that'd be a fun discussion.
I'm telling you, I like my reality show.
The reality UFC Fat Camp. I love it. Alves, at any rate, looking to get back in the win column. Set to face the debuting Aliev, 23-year-old from Tajikistan. Perfect 8-0 in his mixed martial arts career so far. He appeared on the Contender Series last September, where he knocked out Josh Wick in the first round, punching his ticket to the big show. Aliev, despite being the debuting and far less seasoned fighter, is the favorite here. He is minus 160, Alves plus 130. Worth noting, if you're looking at the screen right now, it says that Rafael Alves is associated with MMA Masters. I do not think that's correct. I think he's training at Main Street Boxing and Muay Thai right here in Houston with Krylov Perez, but not 100% sure of that. Keith, there's something to Rafael Alves. There's a reason why they match this guy with people like Damir Ismagulov and Drew Dober. Like, the UFC clearly sees him as a top 10 type talent if he can stay healthy and stay on weight.
Yeah, he's
what
good.
kind of do you see any remaining upside in this guy? And do you think he gets it done against the red hot Aliev?
Yeah, first of all, I don't know how I feel about him like training in Houston. I mean, that's some famous barbecue down there.
Some famous barbecue, and your most famous training partner is Derek Lewis. You don't have to make weight. Yeah, that's dangerous.
Yeah, in Houston also, you not only do you guys got the famous barbecue, but you guys got like that weird stuff. Like you guys be like frying like ostriches and alligator and all kinds of stuff.
We will eat the whole damn zoo.
I tried a whole bunch of stuff when I was down there. Yeah. So, and I was only in Dallas. Dallas is known for like Houston, right? Houston's where it's at, right?
Houston's, I mean, it's close to Louisiana, so we got like the Cajun culture here. You got people that want to eat some frogs and some crawfish. If it fits in the fryer, Houston will eat it.
That's it. That's it. It's like Luma Labume is getting thrown in the fryer.
Well, that, like, if Simone Biles goes to MMA, don't let her debut in Houston. Like, to say that. She would definitely fit in the fryer.
Who's got better stand up, Jordan Levitt or Simone Biles?
Oh man, Simone Biles be hitting like some Chun-Li type like pirouette kicks, like spinning on her hands. Biles first round knockout.
Well, you know what though, Levitt has some pretty good splits though. So I mean, he could go gymnastics. Alves, he's very athletic. He's got that capoeira style. He can fight out of both stances. He tends to fight in spurts where he kind of overwhelms with this explosive shots, and then he lulls you to sleep. He kept doing it against like Damir Ismagulov. He's got fast hands. He's got big power. I mean, he rocked Mark Diakiese with a jab. He's good at getting in and landing shots and then getting out. He does a lot of spinning attacks, which I don't like, especially for a guy whose cardio isn't the best. Hard kicks. He's taken a lot of damage, though. Like he took a lot of damage in that fight against Drew Dober, which, I mean, everyone could say when you fight Drew Dober. He likes judo throws. He'll close the distance, throw some big. He has a BJJ black belt. He has a submission threat. He likes to attack neck, guillotines, rear naked chokes, Darce chokes, proving neckties. That's kind of thing. He's got a great guillotine. Go back to the Mark Diakase fight. It was a guillotine that he caught him with. Though he's willing to lose position to go for a sub, which I'm not crazy about, but he'll sweep on the bottom. He does slow down as fights go on. And as he slowed down in the Drew Dober fight, and then Dober, like, he kept backing himself against the cage. He put him in the worst possibility ever, back yourself against the cage and let Drew Dober just throw punches at you. And then he got crushed to the body. Now, Aliev's one of these guys, like, when I said this is probably one of the least researched one, Aliev is one of the guys I wish I did a lot more research. I watched one fight real quick just to say I did a fight. He's only 23, so everything you can say about him, who knows what it's going to be next time coming out. He could be way more improved. Works behind the jab, straight punches, and then he looks to wrestle. He's a good wrestler. He'll get to the clinch. He'll grind in there. Definitely like an upper body wrestler. He gets in there and he's trying to get you off balance, moving you one way, moving the other way, and finally get you down. Smothering top control. And then on the Contender Series, really good ground and pound. I think this is a tough fight to call. Alves can look brilliant at times, but his gas tank is really concerning to me. I like Aliev's wrestling, but I haven't seen enough film to be really confident taking him. So I'm going to go with Alves. And again, I know it's a little bit of a cop-out, but because I've looked at him and I see a top 15 guy at times, at spurts, at glances, you can see a top 15 guy. I say he lands a big shot. I say he pounces in on a submission. Give me Alves by first round submission.
I'm with you in that this is a hard fight to call. And for me, it comes down to I have a hard time trusting Alves. Like, a lot of these picks for both of us on these shows will be to have something to the effect of if he looks anything like he did back when, boom, or if he comes in shape. I just don't have any confidence in Alves in that regard. Just, even if I think like Main Street with Bob Perez is the perfect place for him to be, and I for what it's worth, I think it's fine. Or if he's down in MMA Masters, I think that's a fine gym as well. The guy's got 3 fights in 3 years, and even weight issues aside, he's had multiple injuries. As you mentioned, he's taken some punishments in his UFC fights. He's hitting 32, and there are certain fighters that they get old fast and they get old overnight. Like 1 minute they're more athletic and sharper and stronger than you think they should be for their age and their mileage, and then the next day they aren't. Like, my go-to example of that was Marcus Davis, who just seemed to get old like literally overnight, like one fight to the next. He went from a borderline top 10 guy to someone who just got crushed by everyone. I'm betting that's going to be Alves, and that makes me sad because he is a top shelf talent. He was a standout athlete when he got to the UFC, and he is absolutely just the size of an ox. Like, he's a short, squat, lightweight, but he is so like muscular.
He might be eating an ox right now too.
He might be eating an ox. He might weigh as much as an ox right now. With a lot of unknowns here, I'm going to go with the younger, fresher guy who has the positive momentum. If Alves comes out and has, just a vintage performance, well, not even vintage, because that implies that he had a performance like it before. No, if he comes out and has the kind of performance that the UFC clearly thinks he's capable of, like if he just dominates Aliev, he's probably fighting the top 10 guy in his next fight. Like,
if he fights exactly like we've never seen him fight before.
Yeah, just but if he just fits all the pieces together that we know are there, but I have a tough time picking that to happen. I'm not even dead sure he makes weight or makes it 2 weigh-ins. Like, who knows? We're talking about a guy who spoke like openly about fighting with like an unhealed broken hand because he had no insurance, he's not American, and couldn't afford to get it fixed.
So I want to correct you. So you've been to the UFC weigh-ins, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in the back they have that like whole like layout of sandwiches and food and fruits. Like, he'll make it to the weigh-ins. I don't know if he'll weigh in.
He'll make it to the wrong side of the velvet ropes. He's going to be back in the press.
He'll make it to the weigh-ins. I don't know if he's going to weigh in.
I mean, I bet the Apex puts out a great spread, man.
All right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Give me Aliev by decision here. Probably a decision where maybe the first round is real tough. Maybe he loses the first round, but Alves gets tired real quick. Aliev takes over, starts to dominate with his wrestling, and he wins going away. Or might even get a late finish. Who knows? But at the very least, has all the momentum when this thing is over.
I remember last time I went to the UFC, they had this unbelievable food for the media. I forget, it was like pasta and chicken and all kind. It was fantastic. Rolls, and I think they might have had desserts, and but it was during media day, and it was because they had like 20 something people, so they fed us right in the middle of it. And it's like you feel bad just sitting there chowing down pasta, you're adding cheese to it and shit like this. And then there's some person sucking weight talking to you. Yeah. As you get a roll, taking a bite out of a roll.
Man, I covered a UFC Fight Night in San Antonio a couple years ago, and it was one of the ones where there were seats up on press row, and then there was the media room that was way down in the bowels of the stadium. And so I posted up in the bowels of the stadium part because they were having the fighters just come through there for their post-fight interviews, just individual ones instead of the big post pay-per-view presser. And of course they fed us like kings at lunchtime and at dinner time, an hour before the event started. And then at about 9 p.m. they just come in and drop 10 pizza boxes down there.
They did the same thing about in New York. It was the same thing, yeah.
But this is the one where Greg Hardy destroyed Juan Adams. And Juan Adams is from Texas. You could have heard a pin drop in that place. But he comes down for his interview. And, I mean, say what you want about the guy. I've been on record many times. But he's a charmer in person. He's someone who's been through, NFL-level media training. And he does an interview. Yeah, Hardy.
Dude, when I interviewed him in Boston, I said the same thing. I said, I kind of like the guy.
No, you do. And dude, he owned that crowd. He did a Brock Lesnar thing where he just turned boos into cheers. Just if he wasn't a terrible person and was a better defensive wrestler, he'd be a star. Anyway, he just totally hung out with the frogs. You got enough pizza? Because dude, they brought down 10 large pizzas and there were 15 people in the room. We could have taken pizzas home. So we just kind of grabs a slice of pepperoni and hangs out while the next interview comes through. Yeah, let's
go.
All right. We head to the women's flyweight division now for a matchup between Jasmine Jasudavicius and Gabriella Fernandes. Jasudavicius, the 33-year-old Canadian, is 7-2 overall. She is 1-1 since joining the UFC out of the 2021 season of Dana White's Contender Series. She debuted last January at UFC 270, taking a unanimous decision over Kay Hansen. Came back in June at UFC on ESPN, Cater versus Emmett, and dropped a unanimous decision to Natalia Silva. She'll look to get back on track against the debuting Fernandes. 29-year-old Brazilian is 8-1 overall. She comes to the UFC as the outgoing LFA interim flyweight champ. She is 3-0 in LFA. Worth noting, she's 3-0 purely on their Brazilian cards. As far as I'm aware, this will be her first time fighting in the United States. And she is a dead pick'em to get it done. Both women right now sitting out there at -110 or -115, depending on which outlet you choose. But there is not currently a favorite. Keith, if there's one thing I know, it's that I do not have a handle on whether Jasmine Jasudavicius is a good fighter or not. She's been in the UFC for 2 fights, and I've been dead wrong picking both of them. So I am definitely flipping this one to you first. Who you got in this one?
I actually think this is one of the more intriguing fights because, I kind of agree with you.
Real quick, let me throw in one more detail. Fernandes is in on not terribly short notice. It's not a week's notice, but less than a month's notice for Courtney Casey, who was supposed to be in against Jasudavicius. So make of that what you will.
This would have been a terrible stylistic matchup for Courtney Casey. Oh, Jasudavicius. I didn't even realize that. Jasudavicius would have just took her down and just held her down.
The biggest losers would have been the fans.
Oh, yeah. It would have just been takedown, round over, takedown, round over, takedown, round over. This is at the Apex, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Vegas 70.
Like, think how fantastic that is. If you're, I don't know if Miss Fernandez has come to America before, but you said this first time fighting in America. Like,
First time fighting in America, yes.
Yeah, I don't know if she's been to America, but say this is like you fly into Vegas and you're the big lights and like you just think that's how America is. Like, that's fantastic. Like,
she's like, I've never fought in front of 75 people before. This is incredible.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. But they should make like your first time in America. Oh, you got the like Omaha, Nebraska card, you know, and you got to drive, and you don't get to fly there. You have to drive. You have to drive through like cornfields and stuff.
It doesn't even matter if you're from Brazil. You got to drive all the way.
That's it. That's it. All right, yeah, and you got to like take pictures at different like markers so they know you didn't fly. Right. All right, back to this fight. Jasudavicius. Yeah, I agree. Like, I think she's better than her record shows. I mean, I think she has a bad record, but like, she's not a big name. I don't know what I'm trying. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but she's huge for the weight class. I mean, she's long and lengthy. She's a bit of a brute, and I don't mean that in an insulting way. I mean, like, she's strong. She fights with high output. She works behind a jab. She does have some things I don't like. Like, she stands. I mean, she's tall, obviously, but she also stands tall, so it makes her a big target. She has been hurt to the body before. She doesn't like being pressured back. She wants to be the one. She wants to be the bull moving forward. But when she can work from the outside. When you get inside on her, she crashes the pocket. She initiates the grappling. She's strong in the clinch. She can grind in there. She likes to grind in the clinch. She's very physically strong, so she looks to like body lock, trips, get the fight to the ground, where I think she's a strong grappler. Good top control, mean ground and pound. Move over for Fernandes. She's a southpaw, a kickboxer. I like what I see in a kickboxing. She's got fast hands, accurate, straight punches down the pipe. I like that she cuts angles really well. She's constantly attacking in different ways, not in the same way, which shows really like intelligence in her striking and growth. She really steps into her shots to generate some good pop. She mixes her punches and her kicks and combos together well. She can throw kicks everywhere. Her legs, I mean, she's a really long leg, so she's a bit of a target to be countered. But she's got a strong Muay Thai clinch. She gets in there and she seems like a Muay Thai kickbox. Like, that's the strength for her. I haven't seen too much of her offensive wrestling or even her defensive wrestling, but she has 2 submission wins on her record. This is a really interesting matchup because I really like what I saw of Fernandes, but Jasudavicius, she's a dog. So give me Fernandes on the feet, give me Jasudavicius on the ground. Fernandes is pretty big though, so I don't know if she'll get bullied by Jasudavicius like others has in the past. Again, that's ignoring her takedown defense. I'm really close on a takedown defense, but it's more of just like her physical build. I'm saying, like, she's long length. They're built very similar. So yeah, it's a big mystery, and I'm gonna take Fernandes because I really like her kicks, but I have no confidence. So don't follow my bet. Don't follow my bets on any of these picks. Don't follow my bets ever. First of all, because again, it's not a betting show. But also, I'm kind of going with the upside because I think Jasudavicius is always going to be like that mid-tier tough. If you face her, like, you better be seasoned because she's tough. But like, she also has like a ceiling where I think if anybody's a top 5 fighter one day, it would be Fernandes. So I'll go with Fernandes again because of my lack of confidence. I'll go split decision.
I like your pick of Fernandes there, and I like the reasons why. That's a brave one. But I completely agree that Jasudavicius at this point is probably more or less a finished product. Like, she's good at what she does, and at least when she's taking on women who should be fighting at strawweight, she's unstoppable at it. Like Julia Pilastri on the Contender Series, Kay Hansen in the UFC, like women that she had a size advantage as well as a wrestling technique advantage over. They couldn't do anything to stop her. Fernandes is definitely not a strawweight in flyweight trunks. Like, she's a sizable woman. That sounds insulting. It's not meant to be. It just means she's really meant to be a flyweight. And yeah, I mean, the question I kept asking myself as I kind of studied up on these two women is, will Fernandes be able to stop Jasudavicius' takedowns? And I don't know either, but it's definitely what it hinges on. I'm leaning the opposite way that you are. I'm going to go with Jasudavicius here, just as someone who, already has some UFC experience. She is a little bit more of a known quantity to me. I understand why they're a pick'em, because I agree with you. Jasudavicius, anybody who even has top 10 upside at flyweight probably is going to find Jasudavicius to be kind of a limited fighter and be able to handle her, but I don't know that yet. So give me Jasudavicius by decision. I almost hope you're right, because if you're right, it'll probably be a more exciting fight to watch. We head now to the welterweight division for a matchup of Canada versus Canada. Dana White's Contender Series 2021 versus Contender Series 2021. It is Mike Malott versus Johan Lainesse. Malott, the 31-year-old Haligonian. And yes, I only know the demonym for people from Halifax because I am an old Jordan Breen disciple.
That's it.
The 31-year-old Haligonian is 8-1-1 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of the 2021 Contender Series. He beat Szymon Szmatricki with a guillotine choke in like 30 seconds, then debuted at UFC 273 last April, where he knocked out Mickey Gall in the first round. He'll be looking to make it 2 in a row against his countryman, Lainesse. The 30-year-old from Quebec is 9-1 overall. He is 1-1 since joining the UFC, debuted last April and got knocked out in the second round by Gabe Green. He next fought at UFC 279 back in September. He had been scheduled to take on Miguel Baeza. Baeza was forced to withdraw. In stepped Darian Weeks on short notice, and Lainesse hung on to win a split decision. So two gentlemen looking for their second win in a row in the UFC. Malott, the heavy favorite to actually get it done. He is minus 220, Lainesse plus 175. For those of you who are enjoying this in the form of an audio podcast, you did not see Keith's what the hell eyebrows over that line. I'm going to flip it to you here, but for what it's worth, I was kind of surprised as well. I thought of these guys as fairly evenly matched. So tell me what the bookies know that I don't.
Yeah, I thought it'd be a pick'em fight because I'm not very confident in my pick. I love that this we got a fight in Vegas and two Canadians. Like that's so random. If you're gonna match two Canadians, like remember was it WrestleMania? I think it was 2 where they had like the satellite to like different spots. Was that the one?
It was one of the first 3 because I watched the first 3 when I was a kid, and one of them I remember that about. I just can't remember which.
They went to like different spots, like we're in New York City. Then they go to like California, and then they went to like Houston or something.
I mean, it was probably one because one had a Canadian on it. It was Roddy Piper versus Hulk Hogan.
But Roddy Piper wasn't Canadian.
Roddy Piper is completely Canadian.
He's Scottish.
He's of Scottish descent. Like
Roddy Piper's from Canada?
Yeah, he's from Canada.
Oh,
but I mean, there's a big
I did not know that.
Big Scottish and Irish ancestry thing in Canada. It's why there's so many people named like Mackenzie and McThis and that in Canada. Yeah.
When I think of wrestlers from Canada, I don't think of Roddy Piper. I think of like Bret Hart. Anyways. Yeah, they should go to like a satellite and have like them two. They have to fight each other, but they have to be wearing flannels and they have to like fight on a covered bridge somewhere. Shout out to Heartland, New Brunswick, Canada. The world's, I know this for a fact, is the world's longest covered bridge. Heartland, New Brunswick, Canada. Look it up.
Is that where your wife is from?
That is where my wife is from. Her hometown. She's former Miss Heartland herself.
Ooh.
So
we've got a former state wrestling champ, a former town beauty queen.
There you go. The American dream, but the Canadian one.
But see, the thing is, I know Rhode Island is small. For all I know, she was like the queen of this city of like 5 million people.
No, I don't know. If anybody, I highly doubt that any of our listeners have ever been to Heartland, New Brunswick, Canada. But if you've driven over the world's longest covered bridge, let us know in the comments. I've done it many times. Lainesse, he's big for the weight class. He likes to work from the outside. He uses footwork to keep his distance, so he's kind of constantly moving. His last fight was tons of movement, but then he like stops on a dime and really steps into his shots. He wants to get in and then get out and get back to moving again. He does load up a bit. Shout out to Daniel Cormier pointed out in his last fight that he kind of really was telegraphing his right hand, almost showing that he was about to throw, like holding it up. He throws a lot of haymakers and he can overthrow at times. He does have some big power. He dropped Gabe Green in his last fight, right? Gabe Green. Mm-hmm. Kicks are a big part of his game. I like that he kicks to the body. He makes a mistake of as he's moving and he's getting pressured, he'll back straight up towards the fence, which I don't like. He also pillars, which he almost exaggerates pillars. He almost turtles with it when defending shots. He will wrestle, but he kind of reaches for his takedowns without much setup. He needs to improve his top control. He doesn't have a single submission in his career, though he did almost catch Gabriel at guillotine. And due to his style, because he's constantly moving, constantly throwing hard, constantly looking for a takedown if you get in too close, he gasses himself out. I mean, it was like about a minute after almost knocking out Gabe Green, he was like super tired and almost finished. Malott's a good athlete. He also moves well. Works behind a jab. He does a double jab, which I do like. He's got good power. Like he gets in there and he throws some hard shots. It's hurt a lot of guys. He can overthrow, which I don't like, and he's been rocked a lot. And that's because he doesn't move his head enough. He's kind of stands straight up. He's a decent wrestler with, I'd say, he's a better grappler than a wrestler. His grappling's pretty good. He's got 4 submission wins. He has that team alpha male guillotine thing down. This is another fight. Like maybe I should have watched more film, and maybe I wouldn't be surprised by the tape study. So just by the line because of my tape study. I'm going to go with Malott simply because he doesn't have the glaring weakness that I see in Lainesse, and that Lainesse telegraphs the shots. He loads up a little bit, and he can gas out. Plus, if someone finishes this fight with this, early, it could be a submission and it could be Malott. Like you almost guarantee that. I don't want to say guarantee, but it's very unlikely that Lainesse is going to catch his first submission against Malott. So I say Lainesse starts to slow down. I say Malott catches him with a shot. I say Malott lands a big shot. I say finishes him with a TKO in the second round.
Yeah. I got to admit that Mike Malott is not somebody that I expected to make it to the UFC. Like, I remember when he appeared on the Contender Series back in 2021. Like, I must have had some responsibility to do with that actual event that night, because I remember just, researching everybody on the card. And I was like, oh, this is the dude that got plunked by Hakeem Dawodu, even though he was like twice his size. And in that fight, he even took Dawodu down, and Dawodu just like sprang back up with like no problem and put him out like 30 seconds later. He's a much better fighter than I thought he was. Big, strong guy. I do think he's a plus athlete for the division. It's hard to get too much of a read on how much he's developed against, he fought a not great guy on the Contender Series, and just Mickey Gall is Mickey Gall. But even though these guys are about the same age, about the same size, I do feel like he has more upside than Lainesse. Lainesse, you laid out his skill set like perfectly, and in most of his fights, he fights the same way. Like, he'll come out kind of like, feeling out with the jab, throwing a few low kicks, and just waiting to throw a flurry of like really hard, maybe like even overly hard punches. And it's a shame because on the Contender Series, I mean, he came out and he like shot a takedown in the first 15 seconds. And I don't think he wanted the takedown. I think he just wanted to keep the guy off balance and guessing. And it set things up for him to knock him out like moments later. I'd love to see him try something like that here. I mean, against an alpha male guy, he does risk running right into the team alpha male guillotine. But if he comes out and just fights his usual game plan, I do think this is Malott's fight to win. I think Malott actually hits harder, even though Lainesse swings harder. And on the ground, I think Malott probably does have a substantial advantage. Give me Malott by... Lainesse has been hard to finish. Give me Malott by decision here, but a pretty one-sided thing that maybe gives me a little more faith even in his upside in this division. Next up on the UFC Fight Night 220 main card is a women's flyweight matchup between the returning Tatiana Suarez and Montana De La Rosa. Suarez, the 32-year-old Californian, is a perfect 8-0 in her mixed martial arts career. She's a perfect 5-0 in the UFC. That's the good news. The bad news is she has not fought at all since June of 2019, absence of over 3.5 years. She last fought at UFC 238, Cejudo versus Moraes. So the last time she fought was headlined by two guys that are not in the UFC right now. I mean, I guess Cejudo's technically under contract, but you know what I mean. Taking a dominant unanimous decision over Nina Nunes. Prior to that, she last fought in September of 2018, where she knocked out recent strawweight champ Carla Esparza in the third round. Her other wins in the UFC include Alexa Grasso, Viviane Pereira, and Amanda Bobby Brundage. And that was long enough ago that I think she was still Amanda Bobby Cooper at the time. A laundry list of injuries have kept Suarez on the shelf for over 3 years. Her fabled return takes place this Saturday. Standing in her way, or trying to stand in her way, will be De La Rosa. The 28-year-old Montana-born, Colorado-based fighter is 12-7-1 overall. She's 5-3-1 in the UFC. She did lose her last time out. It was a unanimous decision loss to Macy Barber at UFC Fight Night Lemos versus Andrade last April. Prior to that, she had not fought since June of 2021, where she knocked out Ariane Lipski in the second round. Odds here heavily favor Suarez, biggest favorite on the card by a wide margin. She is minus 800. De La Rosa plus 500. Keith, I said a little earlier on this show, there are a number of picks, not just tonight, but on any of our shows, where there's always the qualifier if they look anything like they did way back when. I cannot think of a more extreme case of that than Tatiana Suarez coming back after 3.5 years. I mean, the stakes are different, but the question marks hanging over her are at least as big as John Jones being gone for a similar amount of time and coming back up a weight class as well. Tatiana Suarez, in terms of, and even if she comes back and say she comes back and wins the flyweight title and goes down as one of the greatest flyweights of all time, she will still be one of the biggest injury-based what-ifs in MMA history. I mean, you can't quite put her there with like Dominic Cruz or Cain Velasquez, because they actually did win titles, just their reigns were, not
what they could have been.
Yeah, not what they could have been. Whereas, she still hasn't even reached what her peak might be. But it's the same sort of thing, where anytime she's been there and been healthy, people have not been able to lay a finger on her. She obviously comes to the sport with a remarkable background skill set. She's a multiple-time world medalist in wrestling, and then couldn't try out for the Olympics in 2016, ironically because of an injury, turned to BJJ and won two Mundials medals.
Was that when she got cancer?
No, that was the neck injury. The cancer was another one.
Okay.
Cancer was after she already... This is the kind of thing, like, Tatiana Suarez's career is like a Violet Nicholas Sparks novel. Like, it's cancer.
Sorry.
He's this dude that, like, writes romance, novels.
I appreciate you think that I would read. I appreciate that, man.
Well, if you ever decide to read, you're not going to pick up Nicholas Sparks. Because, do you remember that movie, The Notebook?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that was a Nicholas Sparks book. So you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I watched it. Can I rant on the Notebook
Please.
for a second?
Hit me.
All right. First of all, it's a terrible movie, and I'm not one of these like, "Hey, it's a terrible movie because it's from." I don't care. There's good romance movies.
Sure.
But if I remember, now again, I watched it once, but I remember this is the big movie that all the girls are going crazy about. there was a guy and a girl who hooked up, and she's cheating on her boyfriend. Her boyfriend came off as like a pretty decent guy. And I'm like, switch the roles. Make it a guy cheating on his girlfriend with a nice, sweet girl at home. And he's the biggest asshole. But when a girl does it, they found their true love. Like, what?
It's bad.
Yeah. Anyways, that's my rant.
And like Nicholas Sparks stuff, it's all like that. And there's just a lot of like somebody like got cancer and it makes it all tragic and like tears.
Oh, yeah.
It's fucking terrible. But like that's Suarez's career, dude. Like just the fact that Keith had to ask, wait, was this the time she got cancer? I'm like, no, this is the time that she almost had to have her like vertebrae fused.
And then what she have this time? It was ACL.
Yep.
Wasn't her back again though?
I remember the ACL. Like it's a laundry list.
I think it was something with her back too. Like I think it was. I want to say the ACL happened when she was gonna return against Roxanne Modafferi. Like there was a big long layoff. She was coming back after like 2 years. Was going to fight Modafferi, and then she tore her ACL or something like that. It wasn't just one injury. Yeah.
I'm not sure whether I believe there's a God, but I do believe that Roxanne Modafferi has a guardian angel in that case. Suarez, again, this is all if she still is. Suarez at her best is one of the best all-around athletes we've seen in the sport. Like men's or women's division.
There was a time when she was fighting. She was not the champion at 115, excuse me, and everybody was talking to her about her like she was the champion.
Yeah, absolutely. She felt almost as much like an uncrowned champ as like Valentina Shevchenko did when they like first started that season of Tough.
She had a Khabib Nurmagomedov feel to him when he was coming up the rankings.
Yeah, where like
Eddie Alvarez was a champion, but everyone knows like, okay, until you face him.
Yeah.
Or when Conor was a champion and most people was like, yeah, until you face him.
Yeah. Just she checked all the boxes. Fast and explosive.
Yeah.
I hesitate to use this use this expression, but I'm gonna throw it out there. There aren't many women who wrestle like guys. Like that just shoot a takedown from the outside like you expect like a male college wrestler to.
Yeah.
She does, but also can do all of your like trips and throws from the clinch as well. Enormously strong. I mean, at 115 pounds, she was overwhelmingly strong. Carla Esparza is a very strong woman and one of the best wrestlers in the history of that division. And Suarez toyed with her. Yeah. Just Nina Nunes, another one who like, not a wrestler, but like a strong grappler. Suarez toyed with her. Alexa Grasso, a woman who's big enough that she moved up to flyweight as well, and a good athlete. Suarez destroyed her.
Battered her.
Like, if Suarez comes back and she is even 70 or 80% of that, because again, injuries or not, she's 32. You know, she's.
That's the big issue. That's another big issue on top of it.
But if she's even 75 or 80% of what she was for the Nunes fight, this is a soft matchup for her. Montana De La Rosa. It's a good, honestly, it's a good matchup. It's a good return opponent because De La Rosa is a big, like physically strong 125 pounder. So we'll find out right away. Is Suarez going to be able to do these things to legit flyweight bodies? But De La Rosa, her own specialties are like very, very diminished versions of what Suarez.
She's the JD version.
Exactly. De La Rosa, not a plus athlete. Like she's physically strong, but she's not fast. She's willing to try for takedowns from the outside, but she's not good at them. Does her best kind of mauling in the clinch and looking for a trip or a body lock. She's never become a good striker, just always still an awkward striker. I don't think her hands or feet are very fast. Defensive lapses on the feet. Suarez, on top of being probably the best ground fighter in the women's divisions, a few years ago, was a willing and developing striker. She can test her luck against De La Rosa there, but De La Rosa's proven that like she can be hurt on the feet and she can be taken advantage of on the ground. And the women that have really given her trouble recently are women who are bigger, stronger, and more explosive. I mean, Macy Barber, Viviane Araujo, I mean, she had the draw against Mayra Bueno Silva, but like those women are like fast, strong athletes. Suarez should be that if she's anything like she was. And I think she's going to kind of run over De La Rosa. If I were a bettor, I'd be nervous about anyone at minus 800 that we literally haven't seen fight in 3.5 years.
Yeah, that's crazy to me.
But assuming she is herself, like it sounds dismissive to say Suarez by whatever she wants, but I could see Suarez like letting this drag out into the third round just to shake the rust off, try her striking out in a relatively lower risk situation, maybe not forcing the issue as badly as she could on the ground just to get the time in. But if she wants to finish this by first round submission, she can. Give me Suarez. I'm going to say give me Suarez by third round TKO on the ground, but a third round submission wouldn't surprise me either. But I'm hoping for a completely dominant performance, not because I wish ill on Ms. De La Rosa, but because I really, really want Tatiana Suarez back with enough time to see what she can do.
Yeah, it's a shame that we missed this much time with her. I mean, she's been out forever. What Nina Ansaroff, that was her last opponent, right?
And I think she literally was Ansaroff at the time.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Like I think she fought Nina Ansaroff and Amanda Bobby Cooper, two women that don't technically exist on the UFC, the UFC anymore.
I just habit calling her Ansaroff.
Yeah.
Since then, like she's had a baby. And like that baby has like his driver's permit by now. It's like, well, that's how long.
You mean De La Rosa?
No, Nina Ansaroff.
Oh, I was gonna say like De La Rosa's got like an 18-year-old because she had a kid when she was like 15. Yeah, like
she was pregnant the last time Tatiana Suarez fought. It's such a mystery. She just might not be the same fighter we last saw. You mentioned she's 32 years old. The amount of injuries. I mean, you think about the neck injury that she had, the ACL. I think she had another back injury. I swear I remember that being there. Obviously, cancer. We've already missed out so many years in between the injuries. And then forget it. She did fight MMA. Obviously, that takes a toll on your body. But also, she was on a high-level wrestling scene, the highest level wrestling scene for a long time, which wears on your body. To put it at negative 800 to me is. That's what the line would have been if she never left. Like the line would have been if she's, was gone for 3.5 months, not 3.5 years. So that to me is a little. I always guess thinking someone like negative 330. I expected her to be a huge favorite, but that's a little insane to me.
Real quick,
sure.
It was preparing for the 2012 Olympics that she needed disc surgery, and that's when they discovered that she had growths on her thyroid as well. So it was neck injury right into cancer.
The neck injury like saved her life. Yeah.
So, and that was after winning bronzes at 2 like world wrestling championships. Then she flips over to BJJ, wins mundials twice. Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah. So I want to play this out because I don't want like we're talking negative about her. If anybody can overcome it, it is her. You know what I mean? Like she's overcome cancer. So like, I'm not trying to take anything away from her. She's a southpaw who on her feet, she stalks her foes. She's long rangy puncher. She does tend to throw single strikes, which I don't like, but she does a lot of kicks. Even like the Holly Holm side kick. She stands a little tall for my liking. She's a taller woman. She is moving up in weight, so she's not going to be as big as she was at 115. But you mentioned she's an elite wrestler, great entries. She chains her takedowns together well, so that's the best thing about her game. Where if you stuff the takedown, it doesn't matter. She's turning the corner. I have seen her shoot from too far away, but she has those long arms and legs and everything that still works out for her. She can use her size and grind in the clinch. Again, she won't be as big at 125, but I still think that's not going to be an issue for her. She's on top. She's got some incredible control, smothering top control, mean ground and pound. I go back to that Carlos Esparza fight. She batted Carlos Esparza, and Carlos Esparza went on to win the UFC title. She has a submission threat, as you mentioned. She has 3 subs on her record. She has 2 more on the Ultimate Fighter show. De La Rosa, she's improved a lot in her striking. She is a bit of a counter striker. She works behind a jab. She throws straight punches down the pipe. Though she can lunge a little bit, losing technique. Decent pop and overhand. She dropped Mara Romero Barella. She slips punches well. Kicks are definitely the best part of her striking game, though sometimes she will throw some naked leg kicks. She's also heavy in that lead leg, which leaves her open to be in her own legs getting kicked. She is a builder. She doesn't really slow down. She gets stronger as the fight goes on. She's a good wrestler, some good entries, relentless to get there, using like her long legs to like drive into a back trip or something. Good at scrambles, good at back takes. Definitely a grappler style where she's looking for submissions. But she can lose position and she can be pinned down. Like she has that wrestling mentality where she's on her back. She kind of struggles there. I don't think this is a softball for Suarez, but as we just talked about, this is the poor man's version of Suarez. Same frame, same striking style, same kind of will to get the fight to the ground. Everything that Martinez de la Rosa does, Suarez does better. Now, of course, that's saying if this is close to the same Suarez. I say Suarez lands some takedowns, which I think will become easier as the fight goes on. I think Suarez kicks are a big part of her striking game, which she won't be thrown against someone. De La Rosa's kicks are a big part of her striking game, which she won't be doing against someone like Tatiana Suarez, so worried to try to stop takedowns. I think she controls her. I feel the same way. I think she gets a late stoppage. I'll say she batters her up and gets an early third round stoppage and a dominant win. You said this. If she's 75-80% of the fighter that left, she's the biggest threat to Valentina Shevchenko in the division.
Yep, agreed. Next up, we have our only heavyweight match of the evening at UFC Vegas 70, as it is Augusto Sakai trying once again to get things back on track against Don'Tale Mayes. Sakai, the 31-year-old Brazilian, is 15-5-1 overall. He is 4-4 since joining the UFC back in 2018 out of the very first episode of Dana White's Contender Series Brazil. However, the 4-4 is exactly that. He won his first 4 fights in the UFC, and he has lost his last 4. The losing streak in question starts back in September of 2020, includes Alistair Overeem, Jairzinho Rosenstrike, Tai Tuivasa, and Sergey Spivak. All of them by TKO stoppage. The most recent of those, the Spivak fight, was last August at UFC on ESPN, Santos versus Hill. With his job almost certainly in the balance, though never say never when Chase Sherman is still tooling around the division, he will look to get it done against Mayes. The 31-year-old Kentucky native is 9-4 with 1 no contest overall. He is 2-2 with 1 no contest after joining the UFC as a 3-time contestant on Dana White's Contender Series. He was on the very first season, lost to Alan Crowder, came back on season 2, knocked out Mitchell Sipe. That wasn't good enough to get him signed. So he came back on season 3 where he knocked out Ricardo Purcell. That was good enough to get him into the UFC, where his run has been more or less the inverse of Sakai's. He lost his first 2 fights in the UFC, those being against Cyril Gane and Rodrigo Nascimento. Since then, he won back-to-back fights over Roque Martinez and Josh Parisian. His most recent fight, last July at UFC 277, was a unanimous decision loss to Hamdi Abdelwahab that was overturned to a no contest when Abdelwahab tested positive for an entire Walgreens. Odds here, this is yet another pick'em on this card. Both gentlemen available at -115 or -110, depending on your betting outlet of choice. Keith, I feel bad for Augusto Sakai. When you're in a thin division, and I say that ironically since heavyweight is the opposite of thin, but when you're in a thin division, you never get a break. Like once you get top 10 matchups, you never stop getting top 10 matchups. I mean, you can make a good argument that the UFC has matched Sakai harder during his 4-fight losing streak than during his 4-fight winning streak.
Yeah.
You know, he beats Chase Sherman, Andrei Arlovsky. It's like, okay, Sherman's like low level, Arlovsky very faded, but a decent test. Gets Marcin Tybura, even at the time, a borderline top 10 guy, a top 15 guy, beats him, gets Ivanov, another borderline top 15-ish guy. Then he gets Alistair Overeem, Jairzinho Rosenstrike, Tai Tuivasa, and Sergey Spivak. Like you're literally like going up the rankings. And he got Tuivasa right before the Lewis fight. Like Tuivasa was already banging on the door of like the top 10 at the time.
Yeah, when Alistair Overeem is your easiest opponent, that's a tough stretch.
It's ridiculous, and I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure like what flipped the switch there, because Sakai is basically the same fighter he was. He's absolutely huge. You know, he's a guy that, depending on how big a lunch he had, pushes the heavyweight limit. You know, he comes in 255 to 265. He's big, long reach. I mean, he looks jiggly, but he's surprisingly like kind of quick and light on his feet, and just a good bread and butter kickboxer that doesn't have great takedown defense. Like that. I mean, that's my take on him. Like Mays is even huger.
Yeah.
And I just do not know what Mays is good at. He is just, I mean, he's big. He crashes forward.
Well. He moves well. He moves well.
Kind of like Sakai. He moves well for a guy that big.
Yeah.
Like, because he's one of the biggest guys in the division, just in terms of like height and wingspan and legs. You know, swings really hard. Tons of defensive flaws. He's not good on the ground. No. Like Abdel Wahab, like obviously he was steroid enhanced. Like I made the joke, but what he actually tested for was, I believe, an estrogen blocker. Abdel Wahab, also a decorated wrestler, but Abdel Wahab like bodied him. But those are things that Sakai isn't going to do to Mays. Like, I think this might be the UFC giving Sakai a winnable fight, because if he wants to do his thing, just like do his slide laterally around the outside, paw out your jab, throw some low kicks. I think like Mays is clumsy enough at crashing in that Sakai might be able to keep his chin off of the gunnery range. I've got like, God help me, I'm picking this thing to go the distance, and give me Sakai by decision here. I'm not wishing for it, but I'm guessing that Sakai hangs on to a decision.
I'm hoping one of these guys missed the heavyweight limit and the fight gets canceled. No, I'm just no. Actually, I think it could be entertaining, because I was just trying to make a joke. You mentioned Sakai is big, lumbering. I say he was a better athlete, but I think his hand speed is slowing down. His output has slowed down. He does tend to fight in bursts. He'll kind of stand on the outside and then kind of burst into the combo. One of the best things he actually does is probably a high kick. For a big guy, he surprisingly throws some high kicks. You mentioned he'll throw these like light kicks and move. He has some decent pop in his hands. Definitely not like one of the power punches of the division. But I think he's got a lot of defensive holes. He stands straight up. He's open to the body based on having his hands out wide. He can fight in the clinch a little bit. He can kind of wear on his foe in the clinch, dirty box. He had some success against Alistair Overeem and beat him up in the body in the clinch. But you mentioned he's a very bad defensive wrestler. I mean, Sergey Spivak took him down, made him look like a takedown dummy. He struggled to get back up. I mean, Spivak just held him down. Now, that loss has aged well, and Spivak just continues to do that to people. But he has no submission wins. He did gas a little bit against Alistair Overeem. And the biggest concern is his chin. I mean, he's been knocked out in 4 straight fights. But again, as you mentioned, they're not bad losses, though. I mean, I guess the way that happened, they're bad losses, but the names aren't bad. Yeah, this would be the worst name by far.
And they're 2 savage hitters, and then Overeem wore him down over the course of 5 rounds. Like it's not terrible.
Spivak did the same thing. Spivak took him down, finally got in the position and finished him. Mays is also a massive heavyweight, also lumbering, but he's pretty athletic. He moves well. He can fight out of both stances. He has big power, but he telegraphs. He drops his hands. He throws these big looping shots. He'll throw these like flying attacks. He'll throw like a flying knee for no reason. And you mentioned like he has a judo background, but
the Kentucky Judo Federation strikes again, man.
Like I just don't believe in it. He struggles to get back up to his feet when he's taken down. Man, this is a big step up in competition for Mays. but also a step down in competition for Sakai. I'm just worried about Sakai's chin, and I don't think I've ever picked Mays. I mean, I may have. I don't know. He's definitely not one of the guys I go to a lot, but I'm going to go with him here. I mean, I'm just going to go with that he lands a big haymaker and puts Sakai out. I say Mays knocks him out in the first round.
There we go. Yet another fight where Keith and I picked the opposite, and I hope that he's right.
I hope I'm right too.
Next up, and what is currently billed as the co-main event of UFC Vegas 70, is a middleweight matchup between Andre Muniz and Brendan Allen. Muniz, the 32-year-old Brazilian, is 23-4 overall. He is a perfect 5-0 since joining the UFC as a two-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He was on the first season of the Brazil Contender Series, where he did win but was not immediately signed. They brought him back a year later, and he appeared on the third season of the flagship Contender Series, where he choked out Taylor Johnson. That punched his ticket to the UFC, where he has rattled off consecutive wins over Antonio Arroyo, Bartosz Fabinski, Ronaldo Jacare Souza, Erick Anders, and most recently at UFC 276 last July, Uriah Hall, over whom he took a unanimous decision. He will look to make it 6 straight in the UFC and insert himself further into the title picture at 185 pounds against Allen. The 27-year-old Wisconsin native training out of Florida is 20-5 overall. He is 8-2 since joining the UFC, also out of the third season of the Contender Series. He is on a 3-fight winning streak. Those include a makeshift light heavyweight matchup against Sam Alvey last February at UFC Fight Night, Hermansson versus Strickland, and then back down at middleweight, a unanimous decision win over Jacob Malkoun in June, and a first-round submission of Krzysztof Jotko in October at UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Jan. So, 5-fight UFC win streak meets 3-fight UFC win streak. Contention in the division is at stake. Muniz is a comfortable favorite. He's minus 190. Allen plus 155. Keith, I think I said this ahead of the Jotko fight, and I'm starting to shake it off, but I feel as though I wrote Brendan Allen off too quickly. I mean, he's 7-2 in the UFC. He lost to Sean Strickland, which aged pretty well. Strickland made it all the way into the title picture at 185 pounds. He got blitzed by Chris Curtis, but, Chris Curtis dropped into the UFC in 2021 and surprised everybody for about a year there. And against just about everyone else, he's been pretty damn good. Andre Muniz just kind of snuck up on me, at least. This is a surprisingly relevant fight and a pretty good main event or co-main event for a fight night card. Who do you like in this one? And obviously we'll get to it in greater detail on the recap, but kind of how close do you think the winner is to being able to knock on the door of a title shot?
I think Muniz should already be there based on his wins and Allen. I mean, this be a top 5 guy in my opinion, and then maybe one more if he beats, say. I mean, it's tough because with Pahea being the champion now, it kind of really opens the division. If Adesanya beat Pahea, I think this
might be a title eliminator.
I think it would be a title eliminator for Muniz for sure, and possibly Allen too.
But because the new guys there, people like Vettori and Whitaker, and
all these guys are back in the picture. So I saw a lot of people talking about, which is always an issue, is with Pahea and Adesanya fighting again, and it seems like possibly Chimaev and Rob Whitaker could fight, and they said the two winners will face each other. Well, what happens if Adesanya and Whitaker wins? We gonna see them fight a third time? So, anyways, back to that's for another time. Back to this fight. This is a fantastic fight. I think it's the best fight on the card. The one I think it should be the main event. Muniz is a massive middleweight. I mean, I wrote this in my notes. He made Uriah Hall look small. Uriah Hall's a big guy. His striking has come a really long way. He was outstriking Uriah Hall in his last fight. I think a big part of this comes down to opponents are so worried about his takedowns and his entries that it opens up his hands to land. He still has areas that he needs to improve on. He needs to improve his head movement. He still prefers the pillow, which I don't like. But that's what I mean. Obviously, there's more to it, but that's the biggest things. He's got a good kicking game, lots of kicks. He throws a lot of kicks because he's not worried about you grabbing his leg and taking him down. He uses a lot of forward pressure to close the distance. We talked about wrestlers in different kinds of striking. He understands that his striking is to close the distance. He's got good entries. Very physically strong. He can just grab your opponent and pick you up, slam into the canvas. Can get inside of a clinch and work from there. Beautiful inside trips, upper body takedowns. He is an amazing grappler, like truly insane on the ground. Thing of beauty. His top control is so good. He can get submissions from any position. I think he has 15 submissions. It's been a while now, but he submitted Jacare, which is arguably the greatest grappler in MMA history. At least he's in the conversation. Brendan Allen, he's got so much high level experience for a guy who's just 27. He's a high volume striker. He's a pressure striker. He's one of these guys that cardio is a weapon where the longer the fight goes on, the more you feel that Allen can take over. He fights behind a high guard defense. He does stand a little too tall for my liking, which I don't like. And he can make the mistake of overextending, overthrowing his shots. And he's been hurt a lot in his young career. Again, he's fought some really good guys already at 27 years old. But he can crack, and he's got some power, and he's just starting to come into his power year, so he might even be knocking more guys out. He's got a good kicking game. I love his body kick. It's brutal. He'll snap one up to the head quick, and then his calf kicks is such a huge part of his game. I go back to like the Sean Strickland fight. He was having success with the kicks against Sean Strickland. He can wrestle. He's more of a funk style wrestler where it's not the prettiest thing, but just kind of get a scrabble going. But if he gets on top, he's got vicious ground and pound. I feel like his grappling's getting better too. I mean, look at his fight against Krzysztof Jotko. He looks sensational on the ground, throwing subs off of his back, sweeping, advancing position, and then locking in a slick rear naked choke. I love this fight. Allen is. Not only do I love this fight, but it's also like a needed fight after having like week after week after week of minus the pay-per-view, some weak cards. This is what a co-main event or possibly even a main event should look like. Allen is an absolute dog. I think he continues to improve, but I just love Muniz. I think Muniz gets Allen to the ground. I think we get some slick scrambles, but Muniz is so technically sound on the ground. I think eventually he catches the submission, giving Muniz by second round submission.
Great. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that this is such a breath of fresh air after some of the recent cards we've had. This is coming on the heels of UFC Vegas 69, where the co-main event has Jordan Wright in it on a 3-fight losing streak.
That's right.
Like, we don't know yet whether he won because we're taping this before that card takes place, but we're going from cut list if you lose in the co-main event to maybe title shot if you win on consecutive weeks. I mean, that's
yeah. I got confused for a second. Like, what do you mean? Jordan Wright's not getting a title shot.
I agree with everything you put down there. Like, one thing that I like that you mentioned is Allen is still so young. And has so much high level experience. This guy, Brendan Allen, signed with LFA when he was 20 years old. His first 3 career losses came before his 23rd birthday. So age 20, 21, 22. The dude lost to Trevin Giles, Erick Anders, and Anthony Hernandez. Like 3 guys that are all in the UFC right now and were older and more experienced than him.
And if he fought any of those guys right now, I think he wins spectacular.
Yeah. I mean, I won't say I like Erick Anders, but I respect Erick Anders' skills. Sure. I like Anthony Hernandez and Trevin Giles a lot, and I think Allen probably handles all 3 of them.
Hernandez is the only guy that even gives him a fight. He smashes Giles and Anders now. And I think he beats Hernandez soundly too, but like that's the only one that could be competitive.
Yeah. And think of how physically bigger Erick Anderson
Hernandez is a dog too, though. Hernandez is not the guy whose talent jumps out, but he's a dog too. But still, like I feel Ailin wins all three of those.
Think of how much physically bigger Anders probably was than him in 2017.
True.
Yeah, I like Ailin a lot as a fighter, and I think both these guys have, well, it's not even future title contender potential. In Muniz's case, he's a title contender now. If not for timing, as you mentioned, if not for Pereira like tipping everything over, this could be.
Let me ask you this. Sorry to interrupt you. Could Ailin be a champion one day?
Well, that's what I'm about to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Is that, yeah, not only do these guys both have future title contender upside, like for Muniz, the future is now. Ailin is a little bit hamstrung by having dropped a couple of fights in the UFC, though, as again, I think they're both either understandable or forgivable. And he's just 27. That's crazy. He is just really arriving in his physical prime. And as a middleweight, I mean, it's not light heavyweight or heavyweight, but the middleweight top 10 right now is full of guys pushing 40. Jared Cannonier and Derek Brunson are both like 38 or 39 years old.
If Ailin fought for the title right now, something happens. Something happens to him, he breaks his arm or something, and somehow they go into the list of people and Allen's the only one who lines up in the right time against Alex Pereira, I wouldn't be surprised if Ailin beat Pereira right now. No,
and Ailin would go in as like a pretty big underdog. And if I were a betting man, I'd hammer that.
Oh, me too. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm not saying that Ailin will be a champion one day. Like I'm not predicting it, but it's not. I mean, there was a time when Robert Whittaker wasn't viewed as a good talent, but he is what he is. Aillin's upside is at least as high as Robert Whittaker's, and at least a challenge for the title. I mean, like. He's just as likely as Marvin Vittori or Jaron Cannonier who fought for titles.
Absolutely. No, he absolutely is. I have to keep getting myself out of the mentality of thinking he's some kind of busted prospect. Like he still has all his upside.
Yeah,
he's had some growing pains.
Yeah.
Having said that, Muniz is older. He is in his physical prime. Like he is a yoked individual, and stylistically, I think he's a rough matchup for Ailin. Ailin, his ground game developed before his striking game. Like I always draw the loose comparison between him and Luke Rockhold. Or like by the time Luke Rockhold got to the UFC, like he presented as a decent striker, though he never became defensively a very good one. But he was a fantastic grappler before he was any kind of striker.
I think that's a really good comparison.
And they're both kind of like big for the division in the sense of having kind of like long limbs,
bigger guys, more athleticism than technique. And they can be brilliant at times, but also have like bonehead moments. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a really good comparison.
And Muniz is just not a guy to bring those lapses or vulnerabilities to. He's a tank. He's on a roll. And obviously it's one step at a time. He's got to win this fight. He's probably got to win at least one more, then kind of wait for things to shake out. Maybe hope somebody slips on pipes. But he's in championship form if he has it right now. He's a juggernaut physically. It's interesting that his star-making moment came from ruining Jacare, because he's kind of like the young, updated version of Jacare. Like he doesn't have the same credentials in the actual gi and no gi grappling, but in terms of a guy who came up as just a dominant grappler and has developed shockingly good striking, he's on that same pattern, and he's even bigger.
He's bigger
and might have even better athleticism. I don't
know. I mean, that's I don't know. Jacare's athleticism was
and Jacare was old.
Still,
I mean, he was older and had more miles on him in grappling and MMA by the time he got to the UFC. No, you're right. It's more like
he just had this unnatural power that almost like he would land shots that didn't even seem to land that clean, and he'd drop guys because. Yeah. Anyways, the comparison is still great. It's still a good comparison. Let me ask you this: if Muniz fought Pereira right now, not who you picking, he would be favored, wouldn't he? Like the betting favorite. If they somehow something happened and he got scheduled right now against Pereira.
I don't know. I think Pereira might still be like a slight favorite or maybe even money. Like I think people would underestimate Muniz.
Oh, I would be slamming that. I'd be slamming first round submission.
Yeah, because if Israel Adesanya can take you down and hold you down for most of a round, Andre Muniz is literally going to break your shit off.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, one last Texas story here. I covered UFC 262 in person here in Houston, his fight with Jacare. And I once heard Daniel Cormier say, he talked about what it's like to fight in the UFC. And he's like, even if there's 25,000 people screaming in the crowd and the place is just going nuts, you can hear when they drop that little pin in to lock the octagon door. Even if you're on the opposite side, you hear that little ping, and he's like, I just hear that. And it's like, just tells me, okay, ready to go. I'm like, that can't possibly be true. And then I sat on press row for this one, and press row in the Toyota Center is pretty close to the cage. Like for such a big arena, like it's probably like front row is like 8 feet from the base of the cage, and the finishing sequence took place on my side of the cage. So at most they're probably 12 or 15 feet away. The place is going absolutely apeshit, and they were partially obscured by one of the posts, and I still knew that he had broken Jacare's arm because I could hear it.
Yeah,
I could hear it. It sounded like somebody just took like two pencils and snapped them at the same time. It was a loud, high pitched crack, and just I think, dude, Nolan King was sitting right next to me. We both went, "Oh, did he break his arm?" Like before we saw them, before we saw the jumbotron or anything, and then they replayed it like 15 times. I just had to like look away. I'm like, "Stop." And then when I knew that Daniel Cormier was telling the truth, you really can hear everything. And it makes sense now because you could be at a basketball game and you can hear shoes squeak on the thing from like the upper bowl. So I knew what the acoustics were like, but man, unforgettable moment. Anyway, bad matchup for Ailin. If these guys met again in 5 years, who knows?
Yeah, I agree.
Would you be shocked if these guys meet for a title somewhere down the road? No,
absolutely not.
Like they're both of their best days are ahead of them. I say, knocking on wood, since we just finished talking about Tatiana Suarez. But give me Muniz by second round submission here. I think Muniz is going to do surprisingly well on the feet. He's going to march Ailin down. He's going to use pressure. Ailin will not be comfortable. Won't be able to throw any kicks. He won't have the safety valve of being able to take things to the ground that he has against some fighters, or at least he wouldn't want to. And Muniz might even be able to do stuff like walk him into the cage. But Muniz gets him down probably in both rounds. In the first round, Ailin survives it. Second round, Muniz takes the back, chokes him out, or maybe peels off for an armbar. But dominant performance for Andre Muniz. And like I say, both their best days still probably ahead of them. But right now is Muniz's time. That brings us to the main event of UFC Fight Night 220, a light heavyweight matchup between Nikita Krylov and Ryan Spann. Krylov, the 30-year-old Ukrainian, is 29-9 overall. He is 10-7 across two different stints in the UFC. He is 4-4 since returning most recently. He is on a 2-fight win streak. Knocked out Alexander Gustafsson last July at UFC Fight Night, Blades versus Aspinall. That was the UFC London 2 card. Came back at UFC 280 in October and took a unanimous decision, fairly one-sided, over Volkan Oezdemir. He will look to make it 3 in a row against Spann. The 31-year-old Texan is 21-7 overall. He is 7-2 since joining the UFC out of the second season of Dana White's Contender Series. He also is on a 2-fight win streak. Since getting submitted by Anthony Smith back in September of 2021, he rattled off 2 straight wins, choking out Ivan Kudalaba in May, and then coming back in November at UFC 281 and knocking out Dominic Reyes in the first round. Odds here, fairly close, but Krylov is a moderate favorite. He's -150, Spann +120. Keith, we just finished talking about the co-main event, and I mentioned that, I've had to kind of get wise to the idea that Brendan Allen is in no way a bust. He's just a still a hot prospect who's hit a few speed bumps. I've got to think the same thing about Ryan Spann. And honestly, to a lesser extent, even Nikita Krylov. I mean, again, if you go back far enough that you remember his like first heavyweight fights in the UFC literally a decade ago when he was one of the youngest people on roster and he was this pudgy 232-pound heavyweight and also sucked at fighting and was terrible. It's hard to believe that he is a legit, borderline contender, a guy that like skirts around the edges of the top 10. This fight is pretty legit. I'm with you that the co-main event is probably a little higher level and more divisionally relevant than the main event, but this main event is nothing to sneeze at. Krylov is the same fighter he's always been at light heavyweight, just a slightly more refined version. When he finally dropped to light heavyweight in his first run through the UFC, he turned into a light heavyweight who's big, very athletic, has a variety of weapons on the feet as well as on the ground, a finisher, but terrible fight IQ, questionable cardio, and frequent defensive lapses, which is why he's barely over 500 in the UFC. And he's not quite on that Michael Johnson level, but in that same realm of, dude, your best wins and your worst losses are so weird to hold up against each other. That's still the case today. His cardio is a little better, but it's still not great. And you still need a little cardio to do well at 205. Like, at least the best guys at 205 have good cardio.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that since he's been back in the UFC, he beat Oben St. Preux, and that's a guy that he literally got Von Preux choked by the first time they fought, but outgassed St. Preux, didn't get caught up in the chaos, and just beat him bad. And then, again, against Johnny Walker, a guy where this has every possibility of Krylov winning until he loses and lets Johnny Walker do Johnny Walker things to him, and didn't let that happen. That gave me hope for him. And then he goes right into letting Paul Craig be Paul Craig.
Yeah. Yeah. The Ankalaev loss isn't bad, but the Paul Craig submission is bad.
It's just, dude, it's all he does. Like, why? And I mean, and Spann, I'll be able to say this about him as well, but beating a very faded Alexander Gustafsson and a very faded Volkan Oezdemir just doesn't give me enormous confidence in him. Like, I'm not sure that he's turned a corner. I think maybe he's just fought two guys that, in the case of Gustafsson, didn't last long enough to test his gas tank. And in the case of Oezdemir, ironically, since Oezdemir used to be one of the scariest knockout artists in the division, just no longer has what it takes to take advantage of Krylov's defensive lapses. Like, a guy that throws as wild and throws as many head kicks as Krylov and doesn't protect his chin, if they'd even met in like 2016, Oezdemir would have lamped him. That's Krylov to me. Spann, it's all still there for the taking, man. He's in the team photo for the biggest light heavyweight in the history of the sport. Like, I'm sure Johnny Walker is a few pounds heavier on fight night, but Spann is titanic, and his height and his wingspan and the length of his legs is every bit as big. He generally uses it pretty well. Has crushing power. But I think of him as a little bit wild as a striker as well. He's got 2 losses in the UFC. The Johnny Walker one is questionable. Johnny Walker probably should have been, if not disqualified, at least, warned, penalized, restarted. Then, lost to Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith might just be a better fighter.
That's a good loss.
And since then, he has easy wins over Kudalaba and Reyes. Kudalaba is like the poor man's Krylov, and Reyes is every bit as faded as the people Krylov's been fighting. So one guy's going to get his 3rd straight win here, move a notch up in the top 10. The other guy will take a step back. I'm leaning Spann, even though he's the underdog here. Wow. If Krylov is smart, he'll try to wrestle Spann. He's a good offensive wrestler. Spann is all legs and tries to defend takedowns with a guillotine. Like, if Krylov is smart, he'll wrestle Spann.
It's a good guillotine, though.
Yeah. The thing is, betting on Krylov to be smart, I'm past it. I expect instead Krylov will, try to throw head kicks He'll like come in swinging wildly. He'll force the clinch, which is not where you want to be with Ryan Spann. And I think Spann will punish him. Give me Ryan Spann by, I'm going to say second round TKO here. Just wears down Krylov because Spann, I mean, he hasn't had to go past the first round in a while, but he's been fine the few times he's had to. Granted, he was winning those fights, and when you dictate the pace, your gas is better. But yeah, give me Spann to maybe have a bit of a wild first round, but catch Krylov in the second. All bets are off if Krylov shoots a takedown on the first 30 seconds, even if it's just to keep Spann honest, but I'm not betting on it.
He shoots it without a setup. He might get a guillotine. Like that guillotine's pretty good, though. I mean, he jumps hard. It's pretty good. Yeah, this should be just a fun fight. Like, I agree. It's going to answer. I don't know if it should answer questions, but it's definitely going to propel some guy much higher up the rankings. Where it's like it's hard to get excited about both these guys because again, the wins aren't that exciting. This would be a good win for either guy. As Krylov, he's a good athlete. He's elusive. He's got good footwork. He's got good hand speed. He does drop his hands a little bit, but he's got a really good kicking game, as you mentioned. He mixes his striking and his takedown attempts together well. I think you rank his wrestling a little bit higher than I do, but I would say that he's a solid wrestler. But defensively, he's been taken down more for my liking. So his offensive wrestling is good. I think his overall wrestling I'm not as high on. He has a submission threat. He has 15 career subs. He almost caught Leavitt to share a submission. So that tells you everything you need to know. One of the greatest grapplers in the history of the division, or history of the UFC, regardless of division. I don't like that he was hurt by Volkan Ozdemir. But he did show his ability to recover, where in the past he would have like done something wild and got clipped or something. And I used to think he didn't have the greatest cardio, but I think it's more of a body language thing now, where he's a guy who he looks like he's tired. Where if you look at his output doesn't drop. Like even in a fight where he looked tired. Now, Spann, you mentioned, is a huge man, long and lengthy on the feet. He's a patient striker. I think he's showing more improvements in his striking. He was really good at picking up the timing of Dominic Reyes in his last fight. When he does throw, he throws some serious power. I mean, he put down Dominic Reyes with a jab. His left hook is a crushing shot. I don't think he gets enough credit for his ground game. He's got 11 submission wins.
It's 12 now.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. 12 submission wins. You mentioned his guillotine. His guillotine is a specialty. He caught Kudalaba in it. He almost standing triangle chokes Sam Alvey. Again, that's Sam Alvey, but like that's not a guy that you submit. I would be shocked if this fight goes to the judges. I think both guys are finishers. I'm with you, man. I'm going with the upset. Krylov has been cracked a little too much for my liking. I think if Spann lands a big shot, lands a big blow, he could put Krylov down. Or if Krylov makes a mistake, reaches down for a single, leaves his head there, shoots a double without setting something up, Spann can jump on a guillotine. So I think that's what's going to happen. I say Spann hurts him and then he jumps on a guillotine. So give me Spann by first round submission.
There you go. 2 picks for the moderate upset in the main event of UFC Vegas 70. This has been the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 220, Krylov versus Spann. I've been your host, Ben Duffy. He has been Keith Shillan, of course. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of the Shillan and Duffy previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you a mix of serious deep dive analysis of these fights, as well as exactly as much goofball humor and side talk as each fight deserves. And we think we do it better than just about anybody. Please do like, subscribe, drop us a comment. Keith and I both man that comment section, and we love to hear your takes on these fights. If you think we're out of our minds, please let us know. As you may have noticed tonight, we actually read off one of the comments and talked a little bit about it. Just we enjoy having the ongoing dialogue with you guys. We are fans ourselves, and I mean, we'd be talking about this shit for free if we weren't paid for it. Most importantly, join us on the recap. We are live on the Sherdog YouTube page, usually about 10 to 15 minutes after the main event, where Keith takes over the captain's chair. We will talk about all 12 of these fights in reverse order, starting with the main event, going all the way down to the very first prelim. We will talk about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. We will talk about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers. And the live chat is wide open during that time. So we are taking your questions and your comments in real time. We have a growing community of friends who come and hang out with us after the fights, and we would love for you to join them. In between now and then, enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks once again for watching, and by all means, enjoy the fights.
And Ben, just to answer one question that people are probably wondering, that right over here, that is a card with a butt on it.
Dude, show and tell. Bring it up for a second.
I'm sure people are seeing it all. It's a Valentine's Day card I gave to my wife. It says, "I love you, even when you fart in your sleep." Have you say it?
I'm glad you guys are at that stage of the marriage and relationship. Comfortable with one another. All right, guys. See ya.